Biscuits and Bedlam, a Paw Paw's Pet Bakery, Cozy Mystery. Book 1, written and narrated by Lena Turner. Chapter 1. I stood in the middle of the room, my hands on my ample hips, gazing around the shop and surveying the results of all my hard work. I tried blowing away an errant blonde curl that had fallen out of my ponytail and into my eyes to no avail, so I reached up, trying to cram it back in the elastic. It lasted about 5 seconds before springing back down, so I just shook my head in defeat. My hair never liked to be contained. Walking up to the front of the store, I turned around, clasping my hands with pride at the glistening display case of treats. I had worked so hard on the eye-catching displays. While there was no one around to see me, I knew my grin went from ear to ear, and I wanted to jump up and down like a kid. Owning a bakery had been my dream since I was a little girl, but not what you'd normally think of when you heard the term bakery. I didn't cook sweet treats for people. My bakery catered to pets. My name is Myrtle Moore, but everyone calls me Tillie. Well, up until the 5th grade, people called me Myrtle, but once I got teased mercilessly for the old-fashioned name my parents stuck me with, I insisted everyone call me Tillie and refused to acknowledge anyone calling me Myrtle. I've always been a little stubborn. I just put the finishing touches on my new business, Paw Paw's Bakery, and my grand opening would be tomorrow. I knew that sleep would be difficult tonight since my body had been running on adrenaline from excitement all day. Adrenaline and copious amounts of caffeine. I walked behind the counter and grabbed the pink clipboard with my checklist. I needed to go over it one more time, which would make it the 3rd time today, but I didn't want to leave unless I knew everything was going to be perfect for the morning. I went over to the small round table that had baked goods for humans because I wanted something to offer the pet parents for my grand opening. I double-checked the number of cupcakes and cookies I'd picked up earlier today from the muffin tin, the human bakery next door. I checked human food off my list and went through the bakery items for pets in my display case, which included cookies, organic dog biscuits, cupcakes, and single-serving 3-layer cakes. I hoped I had baked enough, but then part of me hoped we ran out. That would show customers how in demand my baked goods were and create a sense of urgency. Everything in Paw Paw's Bakery was made with all natural ingredients and was fit for human consumption. Even though you could eat them, I didn't see why anyone would want to. My goal was to locally source everything, but that would take some time. I quickly walked around the rest of the store where I had displays and bags of pre-made treats that had a shelf life of 5 to 7 days. Then I had a small area with dog accessories such as bowls, collars, and leashes, with a few dog and cat toys as well. I even had pet-centric art on the walls that patrons could buy. I was caught up in my own little world, surveying my store nestled between the muffin tin and the coffee shop when I heard a tap on the glass door. Turning, I saw the owner of the muffin tin, Pete Hamilton. What was he doing here? Maybe wishing me good luck on my grand opening tomorrow. That would certainly be nice. I hadn't officially met him, but I had stopped into the muffin tin a few times to get muffins and cupcakes for breakfast since coming to town, and I knew he was the owner. One thing fun about being an adult is I could have a cupcake for breakfast if I wanted to. There was a picture of him hanging up. I walked to the front door and unlocked it, welcoming him in. "Hi, Pete." "I'm Tillie," I said, offering him my hand, which he ignored, just standing there with a scowl on his face. "Is there something I can help you with?" I tried again, plastering on a smile. Pretty sure now this wasn't a welcoming visit, but not sure how I could have offended him already. Pete moved around me and stopped in front of my bakery case. I could see him furiously scanning all the items as I walked over to him. "My assistant said you came in and bought 3 dozen muffins and 3 dozen cookies this afternoon. I thought this was a dog bakery. Are you trying to pass my delectable baked goods off as dog food?" he shouted, his face growing red. He was not an unattractive man, with his brown hair threaded with gray and fit-looking, much fitter than me. However, he was looking more like a petulant child than a business professional right now. It was all I could do not to take a step back, but this was my store. and I wasn't about to let him know he was making me nervous with his aggressive tone. This wasn't my first go-around with a bully. "No," I said calmly as I pointed to the display table with the human treats. "I bought those baked goods for the pet parents shopping for treats for their fur babies. As you can see, they are very clearly marked," I said, hoping my calmness might rub off on him and take things down a notch. I didn't want to start off on the wrong foot with a local business owner. Hrumph! Fur babies, pet parents, hogwash. My baked goods better not be with your dog crap. Dog crap. Who did he think he was? Now I could feel my own face flush red with anger. How dare he? "I'll have you know my pet treats are made with all organic ingredients. They are good enough for people, not that I want people to eat them. Most people would find them bland. Besides, it's not your business what I do with your baked goods once I buy them." I tried to keep my tone civil, but it wasn't easy. "From now on, stay out of my bakery," he shouted as he moved to the round table, sweeping his cupcakes onto the floor, spinning around and rapidly walking out the door, letting it slam behind him. I stood speechless, watching him leave and walk down the sidewalk out of my sight. I noticed someone who had been looking in our direction head down a side street as soon as I noticed her. I couldn't tell who it was, though I saw enough of her to know she was of medium build and had brown hair that was pulled back off her face. The shadow from the building at the angle she was standing didn't allow me to see her face clearly. I shook my head, putting the mystery woman out of my mind. I didn't want to have a feud with a fellow business owner in a small town, let alone one who was right next door. But I didn't have a clue as to what Pete's problem was. I hoped I could salvage some of the cupcakes. I felt something bump up against the back of my knees and turned to see Daisy, my 2-year-old St. Bernard mix. "What is it, girl? Did that mean man yelling wake you up? You ready to go?" Daisy gave a soft woof, which I took to mean yes. She was past due for her daily walk, so I was sure she was getting antsy. "Where's Beans?" I asked her, and she wagged her tail, narrowly missing a bag of treats on a display table. "Go find Beans," I commanded her. She turned around and trotted in her happy-go-lucky manner to the back room where I assumed Beans was still sleeping. He wasn't as inquisitive as Daisy, except at home. He made sure to investigate anyone who came to our front door. I heard a squeal, and then I heard Daisy whine, and I knew I was right. Beans had been sleeping and must have snapped at Daisy as she woke him up. "Beans, don't you snap at Daisy, you hear?" I hollered and heard the tapping of hooves as Beans came into view. Daisy was right behind him, poor thing. She wanted nothing more than to be Beans' best friend, but the 70-pound miniature pig felt he should get all the attention and just tolerated Daisy. "Are you guys ready to go?" I said, when they were both standing in front of me. They looked expectantly at me, so I took that as a yes. Animals were a lot of work, but my heart melted any time I looked at these two. I couldn't imagine my life without them, Daisy with her long St. Bernard fluff that almost made vacuuming a full-time job, and Beans with his black and white coat that made him look like an Oreo. I quickly cleaned up the cupcake mess Pete made, with a little help from Daisy and Beans licking the floor, and then sat my clipboard on the counter, content that I had everything done for the opening tomorrow with a few less human treats. I was only able to salvage a few cupcakes. The rest had landed on their top, and the icing was all smashed. With one final check to make sure the front door was locked, we all headed out the back door to my Jeep. Daisy got in the back seat, and I buckled her in before grabbing the ramp and letting Beans walk up it and into the passenger seat. Beans always had to ride shotgun, but Daisy didn't seem to mind. I buckled him in and then got in and started the car. They were harder to take places than my kids had been when they were toddlers, but I wouldn't trade them for anything. My pets were my life. Much more loyal than a husband, at least the husband I recently got rid of, and a lot less work. I drove the short 15 minutes out of town to what was my new house. When I pulled into the driveway, the same feeling of astonishment rushed over me that this was really all mine, free and clear. It was the same feeling that had come over me every day for the last 3 months that I had been living here. After I shut the engine off, I unbuckled myself and Beans, getting out and letting both of them out of the car. We all took a quick lap around the block so they could get a little exercise, and then we headed into the house, both of them right on my heels, knowing it was dinner time. I fixed Daisy her kibble and Beans his feed, then grabbed my favorite meal, a bag of microwave popcorn. I put it in the microwave for 3 minutes and poured myself a glass of red wine. Popcorn was a vegetable, wine was a fruit, so the meal was pretty well balanced, if I did say so myself. When the popcorn was done, I headed into the living room. Kicking off my shoes, I plopped on the overstuffed couch, the style circa 1960 with an obnoxious green and gold print. It was in great condition, due to the plastic slipcovers my grandmother kept on all her furniture, which I had promptly removed when I'd moved in, but I had no desire to change the furniture right now. It reminded me too much of my grandma, Flora. As I picked up the remote and surfed through my streaming service looking for something to watch, I told myself that as soon as I finished eating, I would go to bed, because the sooner I went to bed, the sooner tomorrow would come. And I couldn't wait for tomorrow, while I was realistic, that I would probably be operating in the red while I built up my business. I hoped my grand opening would be busy with pets and pet parents. I couldn't wait to meet the pets of Sweet Haven. Hopefully, I wouldn't have any more run-ins with Pete Hamilton. Chapter 2. I pulled up behind the bakery and shut off the engine to my Jeep, hands shaking slightly as if I had had too much caffeine when I hadn't had a drop. My shaking was sheer nervous excitement. Today was the day I was opening my dream, which was either going to be a success or a complete flop. I unbuckled Beans and set up his ramp before letting Daisy out of the back, and then walking up to the back door and getting out my keys. When I went to put my key in the lock, I noticed the door was ajar. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My legs suddenly felt weak and my shaking increased while my lungs felt heavy as I tried to take a deep breath. I tentatively put my hand on the door handle but hesitated for a moment before opening the door fully. I positively knew I had locked the door last night, so it would only be open now if someone had broken in. Why would anyone want to steal pet treats? In my hesitation, Daisy got impatient, so she nosed the door open and bolted in with Beans hot on her trail. "Daisy, come!" I shouted out the command, which normally she responded to, but of course, today, when I really needed her to, she didn't. I waited a couple of seconds, and then I heard barking, followed by a whine. My heart thumped so hard I was afraid it would jump out of my chest as I flung the door the rest of the way open and ran into the shop. I didn't know what was waiting for me in there, but I wasn't leaving my babies to face it alone. "Daisy, come!" I called out again as I could still hear her whining. I walked the rest of the way into the back room where I saw Daisy and Beans standing there staring at someone lying on the floor, and I knew immediately why Daisy had been whining. Lying in my back room, not moving a muscle, was Pete Hamilton. He was either passed out, or I didn't want to think about the alternative. "Pete," I called out. "Pete, can you hear me?" Daisy and Beans looked at me as if they wondered why I was talking and this person laying here wasn't talking back. I took a couple of steps closer and leaned over, and the metallic odor of blood hit me so hard it made me want to hurl. "Pete!" I said loudly and grabbed his shoulder, shaking it. The force of my shake moved his head to the other side, and I jumped back. He didn't respond, and by the hole in the back of his head and the blood underneath it, I didn't expect him to. I reached in my purse for my phone, quickly dialing 911 and giving them my address but not ending the call, as I was instructed to stay on the line until the police arrived. Daisy, Beans, and I just stood there in shock, until I heard sirens and could see the red and blue flashing lights of a cop car through the front windows. I could see through the window in the door that led up to the front. I called out for Beans and Daisy to follow me and walked out to the front of the bakery as the police reached the front door. "He's in there," I said after opening the door. 2 officers rushed in, and we stood outside, me shivering despite the 70-degree morning, when another cop car pulled in. The door to this one opened, and out stepped a handsome-looking man in plain clothes. He was tall to my 5'3", though most people were. I would put him at about 6'2", and he had the physique of an ex-football player, one who stayed in shape. He had close-cropped hair sprinkled with salt and pepper, and I noticed how his dark polo shirt brought out the blue in his eyes, though I wondered why he wasn't in uniform like the others. "Are you the one who called 911?" he asked when he reached where I stood, staring at me in a way that made my nerves jangle even worse, though I hadn't done anything wrong. I hesitated before speaking, trying to gather my thoughts, and he just looked at me, cocking his head and furrowing his brow. Now I was even more nervous. Did he take my hesitation as me needing to think up a lie? I was new in town. What if he thought I'd killed Pete? I couldn't stop all these thoughts from rushing through my head. I took a deep breath to collect myself. "Yes, Tillie Moore," I said, and held out my hand to shake his, which he took. Beans and Daisy took that as license to immediately go over and start sniffing the guy's pant leg. "Beans, Daisy, stop that," I scolded, not wanting to have either of them, but mostly Daisy, slobber on his khaki pants. "It's fine. I'm Sheriff Donovan," he said, and reached down to scratch Beans under the chin and pet Daisy on her head. Beans immediately rubbed against the sheriff's leg, grunting and begging for more attention. Once anyone showed Beans the slightest bit of attention, he hounded them for life. "Sheriff Donovan, you're going to want to see this," one of the officers said, having come back to the front of the bakery. We all moved just inside the front door, and then the sheriff stopped. "Don't go anywhere," he said. I nodded my understanding. Another 15 minutes went by as I tried not to think about the fact that someone had been killed in my place of business, where I had put my savings and so much of my time and energy into this dream. What if my business was over before it started? I immediately felt selfish thinking about my future when I knew someone had just died. I let out a big sigh and slumped against the counter as Sheriff Donovan came back. "Are you okay?" he asked, looking at me with concern. "Yeah, I'm fine." I mean, I wasn't, but telling him that wouldn't help things. The front door opened and 2 paramedics rolled a gurney through. "The body is back there," Sheriff Donovan said, jerking his thumb in the direction of the back room. "I called Marge and she's on her way. Don't touch anything until she says it's okay," he said. The paramedics looked at him with surprise, but didn't say anything and continued through to the back. "I realize you have had a traumatic morning, but I need to ask you a few questions," the sheriff said, interrupting my thoughts. I found myself once again looking into his piercing blue eyes. Of course, of course. "How well did you know Pete Hamilton?" "I didn't. I knew who he was from going into the Muffin Tin, but I just moved to town 3 months ago, so I don't really know anyone, much less him personally." "He didn't have the key to your building?" "Of course not. At least not that I know of. I have no idea how he got in, if that's what you're asking. When I got here, the door was open." "And you just walked in?" He tilted his head and looked at me curiously. I felt a little uncomfortable under his gaze. Well, to be honest, I hesitated, thinking maybe someone had broken in. I was debating the wisdom of going in, but Daisy here got impatient and opened the door with her nose barreling in. Once inside, she barked and started whining, and I had to go in to make sure she was okay. He glanced over to his right, where Daisy had laid down and decided to take a nap. I smiled affectionately at my goofy pooch, but I was sure the sheriff was finding it hard to believe that she had barged in anywhere considering her prone state right now. "What brought you to Sweet Haven?" "I wanted a fresh start. My grandmother had a home here and left it to me when she died, so I decided to move." "Who was your grandmother?" "Flora?" He interrupted me before I even got her last name out. "Flora Moore? Good woman. I'm sorry for your loss. If you can write down your name and phone number, I'll let you go for now and we'll get hold of you if I need anything else," he said and handed me his notepad, where I quickly scribbled down the information he requested. I hate to ask, but today was supposed to be my grand opening. I bit my lip and clenched my fists, bracing myself for what I assumed he was going to say. I'm sorry, Ms. Moore. You definitely won't be able to open today, he said. I sighed and felt tears well up that I struggled to hold back. The last thing I wanted to do was cry in front of him. I kind of thought that. In fact, I need you to stay out of the building until further notice. If you give me a key, I will make sure things are locked up when we leave. I nodded, pulling my key ring from the side pocket of my purse and taking the store key off to hand to him. Can you recommend a locksmith? I guess I should have changed the locks when I first took over the lease, I said ruefully. I'll send someone over to change the locks. I'll let you know when they're done. You can come to the station to pick up your new keys, Sheriff Donovan said gently. Really? Yeah, the local locksmith is a friend of mine. Just tell him to send me the bill. Don't worry about it. Think of it as your welcome to town present, though I do need to ask you not to leave town. What? That sounded serious. Until I finish my investigation, I need you to stay in town. His voice was kind but firm, and my stomach plunged. He didn't come right out and say it, but I knew I was a suspect. There was nothing grand about the opening of my bakery. Chapter 3. Well, guys, we might as well head home, I said dejectedly, and both Daisy and Beans looked at me with sad eyes, almost as if they felt as bad as I did about what happened. I knew that was a lot to infer from an animal, but they were my best friends for a reason. They understood me, more than my ex-husband ever had. We walked over to my Jeep, and I had my hand on the handle to open the back for Daisy when I heard someone call out. I jumped, proof that I was more shaken about what had happened than I thought. I whipped my head around in the direction of the noise to see 3 women standing there. Sorry if we startled you, one of them said. She looked to be about my age, early 50s, with brown hair pulled back in a low ponytail. Then there was another brunette, also about my age, and a younger blonde. That's okay. I'm just a little jumpy. Is that because you found Pete Hamilton dead? She said. This time I really was startled. How on earth did she know this already? My eyes darted to each of their faces when another one of the women spoke up. Hillary, you're scaring her. She's going to think we're stalkers. We heard it on the police scanner. We thought we would come over and see if you're okay. We've been meaning to come introduce ourselves since you moved to town and started working on your bakery, but we never were able to catch you at the right time, the woman called Hillary added. My name is Hillary Rhodes, that's Georgina Parks, and the youngster is Chelsea Hammond. I'm Tillie Moore. Nice to meet you all. Who are your sidekicks? Hillary said, as Beans had already made his way over to Chelsea and she squatted down to pet him. Beans was preening with pride, sitting on his haunches with his head extended upwards. His little corkscrew tail was twitching. He was going to be impossible to deal with after all this attention today. The dog is Daisy, and the pig is Beans. Beans? Chelsea asked, her brow wrinkling. She wasn't the first to question his unusual name. Yep. Beans? It's a funny story. Ooh, tell us. Chelsea clasped her hands. This seemed like a strange topic when we were just discussing a murder, but I was glad for the diversion. My friend raises Vietnamese mini pigs, and when my husband left, she gifted me with a runt she hadn't been able to find a home for. He had all this extra skin and was wrinkly like a bean you soak in water for cooking. My daughter said he looked just like a little bean, and after trying out different names, we kept going back to Beans. It stuck. It suits him well, Chelsea said, continuing to scratch him under his chin. Do you have time for some coffee? My place is pet-friendly, Hillary said. I hesitated, feeling I should be doing something productive, not just sitting around having coffee, but then I realized I had nothing to do, and making new friends was on my list of things I wanted to do in Sweet Haven anyway. I just hadn't had the chance yet, and right now I could really use a friend. We don't bite, Georgina said with a wide grin. I felt a good vibe from all 3. Maybe the positive to come out of today would be meeting them. I'd love to. Let me grab their leashes, I said, and open the back of the Jeep, getting them out. I snapped one on Daisy's collar and one on Beans' harness. Can I walk, Beans? Chelsea said. Sure. I handed her the leash. Hopefully Beans would be enamored enough with his new friend that he would forget how much he hated being on the leash. Welcome to Sweet Haven Beanery, Hillary said when we walked next door. As you can see, Blooms and Blossoms, the flower shop, is to my right, which Georgina owns. If you go 1 block west and 2 blocks south, you'll get to the town boat rental. Chelsea runs the place, but her dad owns it, though not for long. Right, Chels? Unless he changed his mind, she said stiffly, making me think there must be a story there. We walked in, and Hillary motioned for us to have a seat at a big round table in the corner, nestled amongst some bookshelves with paperbacks and board games. I know what these other ladies like. What can I get you? She asked me. I was normally a black coffee straight-up gal, but decided the events of the morning called for some sugar. Whatever latte you recommend, I said. Surprise me. All right, ladies. I will be right back. Hillary walked behind the long, poured concrete counter and grabbed a few oversized ceramic mugs from the wooden shelf above the espresso machine. In the few minutes before Hillary was back with our drinks, I tried to no avail to get Daisy and Beans to quit hounding the other women for attention. Daisy was pulling out all the stops, offering a paw to shake, playing dead, and nudging Georgina's hand. Beans was just as blatantly glued to Chelsea, not letting her stop petting him, though neither woman seemed to mind. Hillary soon came back with our drinks, along with a plate of assorted pastries. I took a sip of my latte, and the chocolate flavor exploded on my tongue. I also got just a hint of cinnamon. Is this a mocha latte with cinnamon? I asked. Hillary nodded. It's one of my favorites. I think the cinnamon really sets off the chocolate. It's delicious. Thank you so much. You should try her mocha latte with chili powder, Chelsea said. I looked at Hillary, wrinkling up my nose a little. Chili powder and a chocolate latte? Don't knock it until you try it, Hillary said, and pushed the tray of pastries in our direction. I could see out of the corner of my eye Daisy was fixated on the treats and drooling. So tell us about yourself, Tillie, Hillary said, breaking a corner off what looked to be a lemon square. I moved here a few months ago because my grandmother left her house to me when she passed away. Who was your grandmother? Hillary said. Flora Moore. Really? She used to come in here once a week for her treat, as she called it, a café au lait and a chocolate croissant. Same order for years. That's my grandmother, a creature of habit, I said, feeling happy to hear that memory. What made you decide to open the bakery? Georgina said. I've always loved animals and I've always loved to bake. When my kids were young, they brought home every animal under the sun, and we didn't have much money back then to buy treats. So I experimented with making homemade pet food and biscuits and such. It got to where family and friends would ask me to make them things, and it was a fun side business while the kids were at home. After they left for college, I thought I'd try and make it into a real business. You're from the South? Hillary said, changing subjects. Your accent. I cringed a little inside. Was it that obvious? Alabama. This is pretty far from your family then, isn't it? Georgina said. I started to answer when I noticed Beans with his head on Chelsea's leg eyeing her cookie. Beans, I scolded. You can push him away, I said to her. Oh, he's fine, she said, leaning over him and talking baby talk. My son and my daughter are 2 years apart, and both at college at the University of Michigan. That made the decision to move here pretty easy. I continued to share my story. How long were you married, if I may ask? Hillary said. You don't need to ask Tillie her entire life story in the first 10 minutes we meet, Georgina chided. Sorry, it's a small town, so when someone new comes to town, it's kind of exciting, Hillary said, not looking embarrassed at all. It's fine, I assured her. I truly didn't mind the questions. I'm an open book, divorced after 25 years, which gave me another reason to move far away, so I didn't have to see him and his floozy around town. "Oh, I'm sorry," Hillary said. "Don't be. A typical midlife crisis. Him, not me. Traded me in for a younger model. A much younger 25-year-old model." "Ew. What would a 25-year-old see in someone our age?" Hillary said, looking at Chelsea. "Hey, I'm 28 and I have no idea," Chelsea joked back. "Well, good riddance, I say, and we're glad to have you as a new resident of Sweet Haven," Georgina said. "I've lived here my entire life, as has Chelsea. Hillary, you moved here what, 10 years ago?" 12. As a matter of fact, it was kind of the same situation as Tillie. Got divorced, wanted a fresh start, so I used my settlement to open a coffee shop. We spent the next half an hour chatting and demolishing the plates of pastries before Hillary, in what I had already figured out was her normal, straightforward manner, brought the conversation back to the topic of Pete Hamilton. It had been nice to forget, if just for a little bit, why I didn't have my grand opening today. "Did you know him before moving to town?" she asked. I shook my head as my fingers fidgeted with a sugar packet. My mind brought back the image of him coming into Paw Paw's and throwing a fit, something I didn't really want to share yet. "I went into his bakery a lot, but that's it." The women exchanged glances, and I felt a little unease growing in me. "What?" I asked. "I just heard him complaining about you," Hillary said. "It sounded like he knew you." "What? Why?" "You never had words with him?" Hillary asked. Her questions were making me think she knew that he had come to my place yesterday. Had she been the one to see us? I wished I could have gotten a better look yesterday, but surely if she had, she would tell me now. "He came into Paw Paw's yesterday, upset that I was going to have his baked goods in a bakery for animals. He said it would contaminate his pastries and give him a bad name. I told him he was ridiculous, and that what I did after I bought his pastries shouldn't really matter to him. They had their own separate table, away from the pet treats, and were very clearly marked. I felt he got a little more wound up than necessary over something that was trivial." The words tumbled out. Anxiety shot through my body as I realized I could very well be a suspect. If whoever watched us argue went to the cops, it would look bad for me. The ladies all nodded. "That's Pete. I don't think he had any other volume besides loud." "Poor Alice," Hillary said. "Who's Alice?" "His wife." Curiosity about a possible other suspect forced my tongue. "No, Alice is his second in command at the bakery. She apprenticed under him starting right after high school and has worked there the last 20 years. I don't know how she could stand working for him, but I know they were close. I know she expressed a few times that he said he would eventually sell her a share of the business, though she hasn't mentioned it in a while," Hillary said. "Does she have shoulder-length brown hair?" I asked. "Yes." "Why, do you know her?" Hillary asked. "No, but Alice has waited on me a few times. She seems nice." "She is much too nice for Pete," Hillary said derisively. "Maybe she would know what he was doing in my shop after hours," I pondered. "Maybe. In any case, we should check on her. She was close to Pete, even if he was a jerk." "I'm sure this has shaken her," Georgina said. "You're right. Let's give her a call," Hillary said. I liked that idea because Alice might know why he was so angry at me for opening a bakery that wasn't competition for the muffin tin. Could she be the missing link that could give me some solid information in case Sheriff Donovan thought I killed Pete? Chapter 4. The next morning, I woke up determined not to dwell on what happened to Pete and the potential demise of my business, or worry that the sheriff might show up any minute and haul me off to the jail for a crime I knew I didn't commit. I needed to keep positive thoughts. When we tried to call Alice yesterday, she didn't answer. Hillary left her a message, but I wasn't sure if she got a call back. Something else for me to think about later. For now, I had a bakery to get back on track. I made a list of everything that was in the bakery that I would need to throw out when I was able to reopen. It seemed a little wasteful, but I didn't feel right selling products that were in a store where someone had died. Once I made my list, I checked what ingredients I had on hand in my kitchen pantry. Much of what I made could be frozen and thawed out when I got the all clear to open, so no time like the present to make new treats. Baking always made me feel better anyway. A few hours later, cooking had given me an appetite, so I fixed myself a quick ham sandwich and gave Daisy and Beans their mid-afternoon snack of frozen green beans. My mind wandered back to who had seen Pete leave Paw Paws. If I could figure out who that was, maybe I could talk to them. Make sure they weren't thinking I had a hand in Pete's murder after witnessing the argument. Sighing, I closed my laptop and popped the last bite of sandwich in my mouth. Beans and Daisy had long ago scarfed down their treats and were sleeping right under me. Drumming my fingers on the counter, I recalled that Sheriff Donovan had told me to follow up with him this afternoon about when I could get back into Paw Paw's bakery, so I glanced at my phone to check the time. It was only 1:30, which was technically afternoon. Feeling a spark of excitement, I jumped up and rinsed my plate in the sink before putting it in the dishwasher and then made sure Beans and Daisy had water. Once I had the kitchen cleaned up, I was going to call the sheriff, hoping he would give me the all clear. While I was wiping off the counter, someone knocked on the door. Daisy heard and was at the door in a flash, wagging her tail happily as she looked out the window to the side of the door. That was odd. Who was at our door that Daisy knew? She definitely wouldn't wag like that for a stranger, but we didn't know many people in town. I looked out the peephole to see it was Sheriff Donovan, and my heart started racing. "This is a surprise," I said when I opened the door. "I'm sorry to bother you. May I come in?" I opened the door, gesturing with my hand to come in, and grabbed Daisy's collar so she didn't block his entrance with her need for attention. I heard the clicking of hooves and knew that Beans was also now awake and wanting to see what all the commotion was about. I closed the door and invited Sheriff Donovan into the kitchen. Daisy and Beans tagged along. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee, tea, water?" "No, thank you." "Then have a seat." I motioned to the kitchen table, taking a seat myself and folding my hands in my lap to keep him from noticing that they were shaking. I was a little nervous, which was silly. I hadn't done anything wrong, but then why was he here? He took a seat and cleared his throat. "Did Pete Hamilton come into your shop the day before yesterday, and did you two have an altercation of some sort?" he said, looking directly into my eyes. I met him head on, knowing that looking away might make it seem I had something to hide. "Yes, he did come in, but I wouldn't call what happened an altercation as much as him venting. He was upset, and I calmly listened to him." "Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" "I didn't think about it, I guess. It wasn't that big of a deal." His eyebrows rose as if he didn't believe me, and I felt a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. "What? Do you think I killed him because he came in my shop and yelled at me?" I said incredulously. "I'm not saying that. I just find it odd that he was killed at your place of business, and you failed to mention to me you had a disagreement." It was all I could do to not jump up with indignation, which I didn't think would help, so I stayed seated and tried hard not to fidget. "I'm telling you it wasn't an altercation, and it wasn't even a disagreement. It was a one-sided rant from him to me." Sheriff Donovan held up his hands as if to ward me off. "I'm just telling you what I heard, and I'm here to get your side of the story." "From whom?" I asked, my eyes narrowing, wondering who had been spying on me and knew Pete had come into my place of business and thrown a hissy fit, as my grandma would have said. I couldn't help but wonder if one of the ladies I'd had tea with yesterday had said something to the police, or if it was the mystery person. Not knowing who had watched Pete storm out of Paw Paw's had me worried. This person could have taken what happened out of context, since she didn't witness the whole conversation. "Can you tell me what happened?" he asked, ignoring my question. I sighed. He came into the bakery and was angry I had purchased some of his baked goods that I had set up on a small table for the pet parents. I wasn't even selling them. It was a grand opening treat. He completely flipped, brushing the whole table of cupcakes onto the floor. Do you have any idea why you having your baked goods made him so angry? He seemed not to like the fact they were by dog treats. Did you have any other interactions with him you didn't tell me about? He said, ignoring my question. I slumped back in my chair, feeling a little defeated. I was in a new town wanting to make a new start. Someone had died in my place of business, and now the sheriff was talking to me like I was a suspect. No, I've told you everything. Like I said, I barely knew the man. Can you tell me if you have any leads on the case? I'm not at liberty to discuss an open investigation. Come on, I'm not going to tell anyone, and don't I deserve to know a little about what's going on? It happened in my place of business. Sheriff Donovan stood up. I think I have all I need. Well, can you at least tell me when I can get back in my store? I should know more soon. You can call me tomorrow for an update. I walked him to the door, and after I shut the door behind him, I leaned against it and rubbed my hands over my eyes. Was my fresh start in a new town going to be my worst mistake? How had I gone from brand new business owner to murder suspect? Chapter 5. You guys behave. I'll be back soon, I said to Beans and Daisy. A little while later, after Sheriff Donovan left, they were practically comatose on the kitchen floor. Clearly, they cared more about napping than they cared about hanging out with me. I made my way into town, stopping first at My Trash Your Treasure, the town's resale shop. After moving, I realized there were a lot of clothes I did not need in my new life or wasn't ever going to fit into again. They had been sitting in the garage taking up space. And today, after the conversation I'd just had with Sheriff Donovan, I couldn't concentrate on baking and decided to finally do something about them and help make space in my garage. Not that I needed the space, but getting rid of clutter made me feel better. Nabbing a parking spot on the street in front of the store, I sat for a moment, my eyes darting to the right and down a couple blocks. I couldn't exactly see my bakery, but I knew it was there. And I felt a pang of anxiety. My insides were at war, my stomach churning with a mixture of excitement that maybe things could get back on track today and fear that they wouldn't. Keeping the negative thoughts out of my head, I pushed open the door and walked inside, almost colliding with a woman who had curly red hair that looked to be in a bun but was fighting against it. Curls were springing out all over, so I wasn't exactly sure what look she was going for, but I could sympathize. A wide smile broke out over her face. Welcome to My Trash Your Treasure. What brings you in today? I have a couple boxes to donate. I looked around, knowing I needed to curb the itch to shop, or I'd end up taking home as much as I had brought to donate. That's wonderful, she trilled and started bouncing up and down on her toes. I couldn't help but smile. Her energy was infectious. You can bring them on in. Do you need help? Nah, I got it. I made 2 trips to bring in the boxes of clothes, setting them by the counter and then waiting while she helped a customer. She finally made her way back to me. Can I give you a receipt for tax purposes? I guess it can't hurt. I shrugged, thinking the chances of me remembering where I put a receipt during tax time were slim to none. I'd better get organized soon, though, now that I owned my own business. She grabbed a pad and started writing something down, ripping off the top sheet and handing it to me. You're new in town, she said, in the form of more of a statement than a question. I nodded. Yeah, I moved here a couple months ago. She looked at me intently, and then her eyes widened. I know who you are, she said. You opened that rival bakery to Pete's, the one he was found murdered in. I heard he was shot. Her voice was loud enough that I saw 2 other customers in the store whip their heads around to look at us. While it was no big surprise that news had traveled fast in this small town, I still wished I could crawl into a hole. This was not what I wanted my bakery to be known for. Yeah, unfortunately that's me. but don't have a rival bakery. My bakery caters to pets only, I said, trying to keep defensiveness out of my voice but feeling the need to defend myself. How did you hear he was shot? Bakery for pets? Like for dogs? She raised her eyebrows, not answering my question. Dogs, cats, pigs, birds, hamsters, you name it. Wow, I never heard of such a thing. How did Pete come to be murdered in your bakery? I have no idea. How did you hear he was shot? I asked again. My friend Karen is a cleaning lady at the police station. She overheard the sheriff on the phone, she said in a hushed whisper. We haven't had a murder here in years. I wish that trend could have continued, I muttered, ready to get out of the store. I'm so sorry for my bad manners. My name is Shelley. Shelley Williams. And I own my trash, your treasure. Welcome to Sweet Haven. Thank you, I said, and grabbed my receipt, heading out the door before she could ask any more questions. She seemed nice and probably meant well, but all her questions really set off my anxiety again. I didn't want to be known around town as the person whose business Pete died in. I made my way to the police station at the other end of town, which took me all of 10 minutes, most of it waiting for the light to change at the one stoplight. I couldn't help but smile when I saw the diner. Eat 'em Up had been here since I was a girl, and at that time, the only place to eat in town. My grandmother took me there for a burger and fries with a shake as a treat each time I came to visit. I could almost taste the strawberry shake, and it had been decades since my last one. I made a mental note to stop in soon. As I was driving, I noticed not much else had changed either. Sweet Haven had been founded in the mid-1800s and still had the same small-town feel as I imagined it had back in the day. I loved the old brick buildings of the downtown area and the manicured green spaces dotting the main street. There was even a white Victorian gazebo in the town common that had seen weddings, big band concerts, and many other town functions. Sweet Haven officials had done a good job of preserving the old-fashioned feel, which I was sure helped the tourism trade. Being a small town nestled on Lake Michigan meant a huge influx of people in the summer. What did you say your name was? The young lady behind the counter asked when I walked into the police station. Tillie Moore. The receptionist nodded and picked up her phone. Sheriff Donovan, Tillie Moore is here to see you. Uh-huh. Okay, I'll tell her. My heart started to sink at the thought that he couldn't meet with me. Though it was a little presumptuous for me to just show up, he had said to call. He said go on back. Second door to the left. I headed back the long hallway, finding the second door on the left partially open. I pushed it the rest of the way and saw him sitting behind his dark mahogany desk. The office was sparse, with only a few framed certificates on the wall and one of those picture cubes on his desk that looked like him and friends or maybe brothers. His head snapped up from whatever he was looking at when he heard the door creak. Go ahead and have a seat, he said, motioning to the chair in front of his desk. I know you said call, but I was in town running errands and thought I would stop by instead. That's fine. That's fine, he said as he shuffled papers around his desk before looking up at me. A minute or so of silence went by, where he just stared at me, and I did my best not to squirm, thinking I should have just called. Not able to stand it anymore, I spoke up. You said to get in touch and maybe I'd be able to get in my shop? I know it's only been a few hours since you left my house, but I was in town, I said, trailing off. Yes, the crime text just got done a few minutes ago and it's all clear. Oh, and here are the new keys. He pulled out the top desk drawer, fished the keys out, and slid them across the desk. I wanted to smile, but the somber look on his face made me think I'd better not get ahead of myself. You don't look happy about that, I said. Is there a problem? He gave a slight grin. Don't take it personally. I'm happy you can get in your bakery, but I'm not any closer to finding out who murdered Pete, and that makes me decidedly unhappy, he said, rubbing his hands over his face. I wish I could help, but I really don't know anyone in town, so have no idea who could have done it. He gave a short laugh. Of course not. I shouldn't have even said anything. In fact, forget I said a word. Go ahead. Do what you need to do in your bakery, but in case you decide to leave town, make sure you let me know. And I'm still a suspect? Everyone is a suspect, until they're not. That includes you. While I was happy to get into my bakery and reschedule the grand opening, his parting sentence didn't fill me with the warm and fuzzies. As the new person in town, it would be easy to blame me. Maybe I should ask around. Ask Hillary and my other new friends if they had any idea who might have killed him. Someone other than me. Chapter 6. I stood in the front of my bakery, hands on hips, surveying everything in front of me with a huge sense of deja vu as I remembered standing here just a few short days ago in this exact same spot, thinking that I was getting ready to open my bakery. Instead, I ended up being a suspect in a murder. The thought that I might need to find an attorney just in case kept hanging in the back of my mind. Or at least, I should try and do some asking around. Find another suspect the sheriff could tie to the murder. I just wasn't sure how to go about that, being new in town. I had tried to stop at the Muffin Tin to talk to Alice, but it had been closed, which wasn't surprising. As I walked through the store, I once again thought the cleaners Sheriff Donovan had called for me had done a fabulous job. You couldn't tell anything nefarious had ever transpired in my back room. I was ready to open for business. Although I wasn't sure I would ever get the vision of a dead body out of my head, a memory was all that tainted my business premises today. I had thrown away everything I had baked for my first grand opening and started from scratch. There was no way I could sell anything that had been here when Pete had died. Not to mention all the chemicals I assumed they used on crime scenes were not good for consumables. Even though it didn't look as if anything had been touched, I wasn't going to take that chance. Though I hated throwing the entire product away and didn't even want to think about how much money it cost, it had been a great distraction to start over. The one thing I hadn't done this time was provide any treats for the pet parents. Even if I had been able to bring myself to go into Pete's bakery, it had not been open since his murder. I had tried a few times to see if I could talk to Alice casually without calling and putting her on the spot. Since I didn't actually know her, that seemed awkward. "Hey," I called out to Daisy and Beans, who were lying in beds I had set up in the corner of the back room. It's time to open the doors and wait for the hordes of customers to come in. I said that with much more conviction than I felt as I walked to the front door to open it. I had been a lot more excited the last time I thought I was going to open. I had tossed and turned all night, wondering if people would boycott my shop, not wanting to buy treats for their pets at a place where someone had been found dead. I knew by now that word was probably all over town, as I had seen a story about the murder in the local paper last night. It was a big article that had said, according to a source, Pete Hamilton had been shot in the soon-to-open Paw Paw's bakery. I wondered if the paper had gotten their scoop from Shelley's friend Karen, since I doubted Sheriff Donovan had given it to them. I knew something of this magnitude wouldn't stay quiet for long. Though maybe that saying all publicity was good, publicity would ring true. I propped the front door open with a 5-gallon bucket containing petunias I had planted and put a sidewalk sign out that promoted a free treat with every purchase. Then I went back in, feeling nervous excitement and crossing my fingers that today wouldn't be a complete flop. I was fussing over a display that really didn't need me to arrange it anymore when I heard noise behind me and turned around to see my new friends walking through the doorway. "Ladies, what brings you in?" I said, feeling my heart swell that they cared enough to come support me. "Your grand opening, of course. What we can't believe is that you didn't call to tell us," Hillary said as she entered with Georgina Chelsea and another woman who looked familiar. "I'm sorry, it's just been crazy, and don't worry about it," she interrupted me. "We wanted to show our support, and we brought you something," Hillary said. "Tillie, this is Alice. She worked for Pete," Georgina said. "I'm so sorry for your loss," I said, thinking I should acknowledge in some way her recently departed boss. No wonder she looked familiar. I had seen her many times at the Muffin Tin. Just out of context, I didn't recognize her right away. Maybe I could delicately ask her if she knew of any enemies Pete might have had. Thank you. A soft voice came out of the woman whose brown eyes seemed sad. She took a step forward, handing me 2 large bakery boxes. I dug up your original order and duplicated it. You didn't have to do that, I said, thinking how sweet of a gesture it was. I didn't even know the bakery was open. I've tried to stop by a couple times, and it was closed. It's not open, but I'm going to reopen tomorrow. I know Pete wasn't very nice to you, and I felt bad about what happened, so I went in this morning to make those for you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Alice. I did appreciate her gesture, but wanted to ask her about Pete. I just didn't want to blurt it out. I wanted to be more subtle if I could. So show us around, Hillary said. I walked Hillary, Georgina, and Alice through the bakery, explaining the different treats I made. Chelsea was crouched down, loving on beans. If I were a betting woman, I wouldn't be surprised if Chelsea would acquire her own miniature Vietnamese pig sooner rather than later. These look just like the cupcakes I make at the bakery, Alice said. I would kill for your mixer, she said, as I led them to the back to show them the kitchen. That mixer really saves me a lot of elbow grease. I know it seems very stainless steel and sterile back here, and so different from the vibe I'm trying to create in the retail part of the store. But I'm a bit of a cleanliness fanatic. Customers aren't going to come back here. The easier it is to make things and clean up, the better. You have a better kitchen than we do at the Muffin Tin, said Alice. I love the orange and turquoise color scheme you have up front. It's bright and fun. I might need to change up the decor at my coffee shop. Yours makes mine look drab, Hillary said. I smiled, her comment making me feel like I did something right. Thank you. As far as the baked goods, I make them just like you would for humans, just with modified ingredients and a lot less sugar. You can eat them, but you would find them bland. Your detail is amazing. Those animals you have as decorations on top, especially the little spotted pigs that look like beans, Alice said as we walked back up front and peered in the display case. It's such a cute touch. Human versions of these would go like hot cakes. Hey, I have an idea. You guys should do some kind of joint cupcake promotion for both owner and pet, Hillary said. It's a great idea. I'm not sure what's going to happen with the bakery, to be honest. But when things settle down, maybe we could do that, Alice said earnestly. I nodded. Don't feel you have to answer, as it's none of my business. But who owns the bakery if Pete's dead? I figured there was no time like the present to ask since the topic came up, even if it was a bit intrusive. I saw Alice's face twist up in disgust, and Hillary answered for her, Pete's soon-to-be ex-wife, Michelle, hence the expression on Alice's face. Do you think she's going to sell or just keep it running? Georgina asked. She's all about the money, so whatever is going to make her the most, though she's never worked there and has no idea how the place runs. I'm sure she'll expect me to run it for her, Alice said bitterly. I saw Hillary and Georgina give her sympathetic looks. There was clearly more to the story here. I didn't feel this was the right time or place to ask, but as a potential suspect, my life was on the line, so to speak. Alice, Pete came in to see me at Paw Paw's the day before he died, and he was really angry at me. Do you know why? Alice shrugged. No. He made a couple of comments that your shop was a stupid idea after you put your sign up announcing the grand opening. He really couldn't imagine who would buy special baked goods for animals. Sorry, she said when she saw me wince. I hoped he was in the minority, and that Sweet Haven was ready to embrace a bakery for pets. It's fine. He's not the first to say that. But as far as why he even cared, I don't know. Alice shrugged and looked away from me. Really? You don't know why he was so angry at her? He had a huge tantrum and then stormed out of her shop, Hillary said. I cocked my head to look at her. I had told her, Georgina and Chelsea, that he was angry, but not that he had stormed out of my shop. Was Hillary the one I had seen spying on me? As I was formulating a way to ask Hillary if she had been spying on me without coming across accusatory, a couple walked in with their little terrier, and I was more excited about my first real customer than gossip. Listen, we'll get out of your hair and let you get to your customers, but don't think you can hide from us. We have book club on Thursdays, 8 p.m., at the coffee shop after it closes. We will see you there, Hillary said as a command, not a question. I nodded and thanked Alice again, and then walked up to my customers as the ladies walked out the door. I was feeling hopeful that maybe the second grand opening was going to be everything I'd hoped it would be. Hi, and welcome to Paw Paw's Bakery. Who is this little guy? May I pet him? I asked, knowing it was never okay to just assume you could pet someone's dog or any animal for that matter. This is Hercules, and of course you can. He loves all the attention he can get. Trust me, I understand that. Daisy and Beans are the same. Daisy and Beans must have heard their names as they came trotting out of the back room, and Hercules gave a yap, wagging his tail. Oh my, those are big animals, the woman said, and her eyes darted back and forth between her little Hercules and my two. They may be big, but they are super friendly, I said, but realized I didn't need to, as Daisy came over and, as she always did when meeting a small dog, lay down so she was nose to nose with the little terrier. Beans was a little more discriminating, liking to hang back until he was sure the other animal was worthy of his attention, but he didn't stand back for long. He too nosed the small dog, who seemed thrilled to have playmates. It was amazing how quickly animals made friends. I've never seen a big dog act like that with my Hercules, and I've sure never seen a pet pig before. Beans took that moment to walk over to the lady and look up at her expectantly. May I? Of course. The woman reached down and scratched Beans behind the ears, and my heart was full. This was what I had envisioned when opening Paw Paws, a pet community space that hopefully also managed to sell some treats. What kind of treat do you like, Hercules? I got up and walked over to the bakery case. You look like a carrot cake guy to me. I reached and grabbed a sample of a mini carrot cake cupcake. Can Hercules have a nibble? The woman nodded. I handed the treat down to Hercules, and he gulped it down and immediately looked back up at me, wagging his tail, looking for more. I'd say he likes it. He's usually picky. I'll take a dozen. My first sale. I wanted to skip to the cash register, but remained calm and professional. I boxed her mini carrot cakes and rang her up. Calmness washed over me for the first time in weeks. My business was going to be a success. I just knew it. Chapter 7. I locked the front door and turned to Beans and Daisy, who had been following me around for the last 15 minutes. They were probably hungry and ready to go home. Just a few more minutes, guys, and we'll get out of here, I said, and they both looked at me expectantly, Daisy wagging her tail while her tongue lolled out the side of her mouth. Not her best look, but it always made me laugh when she looked goofy. I finished tallying the receipts. While I hadn't made millions, customers had been slow but steady, and I wasn't disappointed in sales. Considering all that had happened leading up to my first day, the fact that I had made any sales was something I felt positive about. I walked behind the bakery case with my pad and pen and did a quick count. As I took inventory, I couldn't contain my glee that I was almost out of everything. That meant I had some baking ahead of me tonight, but I didn't mind that a bit. I had baked extra this time in preparation of any other mishaps and popped them in the freezer. I could pull out the goodies I had in the freezer tonight to be ready tomorrow, and then when I got home tonight or tomorrow, I would have to find time to bake. This had been my biggest concern when I decided to open Paw Paws, figuring out how much and how often to make my goods. But I knew it would take a while for there to be a rhyme or reason to sales, and baking was my happy place. So it all worked out. Looks like you two aren't the only ones who enjoy my cupcakes, I said to Daisy and Beans, who were still following me around, probably getting a whiff of the peanut butter muffins and carrot cake cupcakes as I opened the door to the bakery case. Before closing the door, I grabbed one of the cupcakes that had a little bit of lopsided frosting and figured what the heck. It was all about celebrating today's success. Without the support of Daisy and Beans, I knew I probably wouldn't have gotten this far. I broke the cupcake in half. "Sit," I commanded, and they both sat. Daisy was well trained, and Beans was too, though he often had a mind of his own, but if you held any kind of food in your hand, he was guaranteed to mind. "I just love you guys," I said, handing them each their snack, which they both took gently. "I just need to take some things out of the freezer and then we can get going." I walked into the back, admiring my commercial kitchen with its high-end refrigerator and freezer, the biggest expenses of my business opening. I had thrown everything out, so when I opened the freezer door, there was very little in there. Just what I had brought in with me this morning. I took out a tray of cupcakes, cookies and bones, setting them on the large stainless steel workspace, and making sure they were still tightly covered. Of course, Beans and Daisy were right by my side, probably thinking they might get lucky and get another treat. I just laughed at them. "We'll get food when we get home." I walked over to my makeshift office and grabbed my purse and my little insulated tote bag that had my lunch and swiped my keys off the desk. My recipe book was sitting on the corner. I picked it up to take it home and then set it back down. I was tired, so instead of baking tonight at home, I would get a good night's sleep and come in early. There was nothing like a fresh batch of baked goods to start the morning off right. "Ready?" I said to my pets. I knew I was. My feet hurt, and I was exhausted but happy. I started walking to the back door when I heard someone pounding on the front. They were pounding so hard I could hear the glass rattle. Daisy took off after the sound, and I had to admit my heart was racing just a little. I was glad I had her with me. Though she had never been aggressive toward anyone, at least her sheer size might intimidate a would-be burglar. I walked up to the front with Beans on my heels to see Daisy just staring at the glass doors, wagging her tail. A woman with a sour expression on her face was continuing to pound on the door. As I walked up, I could see she was very well put together, and I absently tried to tuck some errant curls behind my ear that had fallen from my bun. I hadn't given my hair a single thought since I opened this morning, and I was sure I looked a mess. Even on a good day, I didn't look as well put together as this woman. Black hair pulled back in a sleek twist. She had on a black pencil skirt and close-fitting sweater set that was elegant and showed off her svelte figure. She definitely looked like someone who might have a pampered pooch at home, so as tired as I was as a new business owner, I wasn't about to turn away a potential customer. I unlocked the door and held it open while I plastered a smile on my face that I hoped hid how tired I was. "Come on in." I was just getting ready to head out, but I'd be more than happy to show you what we have for treats. "Do you have a dog or cat?" I asked. While people had many other types of pets, the average person had either a dog or a cat. And so that was my go-to customer service question. "Get your dirty beast away from me," the woman said as she shooed Daisy away with her perfectly manicured hands. I was taken off guard. It didn't really sound like a dog lover was standing in front of me, so I grabbed Daisy's collar and pulled her back a little, motioning for her to sit. "How can I help you?" I tried again. "You can help me by closing up this poor excuse for a bakery and going back to wherever you came from," she spat out. Indignation made me stiffen. "Listen, I don't know you, and I'm not going to stand here and have some kind of argument, so if you're not interested in buying a baked good for your pet, then I will have to ask you to leave," I said with as much diplomacy as I could muster. "You killed my husband," she said as one of those manicured talons hit me square in the chest. I stood there rooted to the spot, my mouth hanging wide open. "Are you Pete Hamilton's ex-wife?" That was the only explanation I could think of as to why this woman was so hot under the collar. "We weren't divorced. And you admit you killed my husband?" I should have known the small-town cops wouldn't be able to catch a criminal if it was handed to them on a silver platter. She was one angry woman, I thought, feeling a little bit better that she apparently had it out for the police force as much as for me. But I wasn't about to let her accuse me, and I definitely hadn't admitted to anything, no matter what her twisted brain was telling her. "I am so sorry for your loss. but I can assure you I had nothing to do with your husband's death." "You mean murder," she sneered, "as if I'm so dumb to think you would admit it." "Well, you did just say that," I thought, but figured I should probably keep my mouth shut. "I can assure you," I started out again, but she interrupted me. "The cops in this town might not be able to solve my husband's murder, but I can tell you I will leave no stone unturned until you pay." With that, she spun around and flounced off, leaving me open-mouthed in shock, watching her walk out the door. But I giggled when I saw she had a long, slimy piece of slobber on her previously pristine skirt that had to have come from Daisy. Served her right for being nasty and illegally parking her sleek black Mercedes in front of a fire hydrant. I locked the front door again and all of a sudden felt weak from the heated interaction. The joy I had felt a few minutes ago at what I deemed a successful grand opening had just been shot down. It seemed I might have much bigger problems on my hands than selling cupcakes. Chapter 8. 2 days later, I pulled up to Sweet Haven Beanery. I had run home after closing Paw Paws to drop off Daisy and Beans before heading back to town for the book club Hillary insisted I attend. To be honest, I thought a book club sounded like a lot of fun, and I wanted to get to know the women better. I was glad she invited me. I might be able to find out some information to help me figure out who had murdered Pete as well. The last 2 days I had been racking my brain trying to figure out how I could find out more information about Michelle. She seemed like a woman who was a little unhinged, though her husband, or ex, whichever it was, had just died. That was bound to do a number on you. Maybe these ladies would be able to help me with that. However, there was just a part of me, especially after the other night and the run-in with Michelle, that was a little fearful of all the questions that I was sure people were bound to ask. I mean, I couldn't blame them. In the short time I had been living in Sweet Haven, I could see with my own eyes there wasn't a lot in the way of crime in town, so I knew that this murder was quite the big deal. Add that to the fact that the town paper, normally a weekly affair, was putting out daily special editions chronicling the progress, or rather the lack of progress, in the investigation. I would be shocked if it wasn't the hot topic at book club too. But then maybe this book club wasn't like the one I had attended back home. At home, book club had been an excuse for a girls' night full of wine, fun snacks, and loads of gossip. I parked and grabbed the cookies I had made for the occasion from where they were sitting on the passenger seat and made my way in. I entered and immediately saw Hillary, Georgina, Chelsea, Alice, and some women I didn't know. Then I recognized the lady from My Trash Your Treasure. I just couldn't remember her name. I was horrible with names. Faces I remembered, names not so much. "Tillie, you made it," Georgina said, walking up to me, and Hillary looked up from her conversation with a woman I didn't know and waved. "I brought some cookies. Human cookies, not pet cookies," I joked. "Where should I put them?" "You didn't need to do that," Hillary said, coming up and grabbing the tray out of my hand, lifting the foil and grabbing one of the lemon-curd sugar cookies off the tray. She inhaled and her eyes went wide. "Wow, the citrus smell is divine. If these cookies taste even half as good as they smell, you might need to open a people bakery." "It's my favorite cookie, a recipe of my grandmother's," I said. Hillary took a bite and faked a swoon. "Oh my, it is every bit as good as it smells." "Ladies, for the couple of you who haven't yet met her, this is Tillie from Paw Paw's Bakery, and she brought some of the most amazing lemon-curd sugar cookies." Hillary turned and sat the cookies on a table that had chips, cheeses, crackers, and other snacks. I felt my face grow hot with embarrassment at the attention. I looked over and caught Alice staring at me with her mouth in a thin line, but then as soon as our eyes met, it turned into a smile. I hoped she wasn't upset about Hillary's comment. I had zero desire to ever open a bakery for people. I gave a slight wave, and she waved back, still with a broad smile, so I figured whatever had her grimacing had nothing to do with me. "Let me introduce you to the few ladies you haven't met yet," Georgina said, and took me around. A few minutes later, Hillary called out, "All right, ladies, bring your chairs into a circle and let's get this thing started." Everyone grabbed a chair, pushing some tables out of the way and making a circle in the middle of the room. Maybe I was wrong, and this was actually a book group that discussed books. Did everyone get through our cozy mystery book pick? Deal Gone Dead by Carolyn Ritter Aspenson? Hillary asked, and the ladies nodded. I had not. In fact, when Hillary had invited me to the club, she hadn't told me, nor had I thought to ask what actual book they were to discuss. Though even if I had known, I wouldn't have had time to read it, but that was okay. I was just enjoying being here with the ladies and starting to feel a little more relaxed as no one had mentioned the murder. The next 30 minutes or so went quickly as the ladies discussed the main characters of the story and what they liked and didn't like about it. After much conversation, Hillary said it was time to take a break for coffee and snacks. I started to get out of my seat thinking coffee sounded good, even though I probably didn't need the caffeine this late at night when one of the ladies, I think her name was Sharon, spoke up. Before we stuff our faces, I have a question, she said, and her head swiveled to me. She looked entirely too eager, and it made me feel very uneasy. Sure. What other thoughts do you have about the book? Hillary said. It's not about the book. I have a question for Tillie. She looked at me again, a smug smile in place. I don't think we need to bother Tillie with any questions that aren't book club related, Georgina interjected. I sent her a grateful look. I had a feeling whatever Sharon wanted to ask me wouldn't be good. However, Sharon wasn't about to be deterred. Surely she can handle a couple questions, she said, eyes flashing like she was almost daring me to say no. I felt I had no choice but to play along. If she asked me questions about what I thought she was going to ask me, saying I didn't want to talk about it would make me look much worse than talking about it and telling the truth. I also wouldn't get any information if I shut her down. Maybe this would be a good way to start the conversation so I could get some answers. Sure, I don't mind answering questions. I like to talk about my business, I added, even though I knew that the actual bakery was probably the last thing she had questions about. Did you kill Pete Hamilton? Sharon came right out and asked. I was surprised she was that blunt. I expected her to ask about the murder, but I didn't expect her to ask if I did it. Apparently, I wasn't the only one a little bit shocked by her question. I heard a few gasps, and Hillary jumped to her feet in my defense. Sharon Taylor, I can't believe that you would ask such a question. What? At least half of us were wondering. I'm just the only one brave enough to actually ask. Hillary started to protest again, and I waved my hand to stop her. No, I did not kill Pete Hamilton. I don't know who killed Pete Hamilton, and I have no idea why someone would kill him in my bakery, I said matter-of-factly, hoping I hadn't let any defensiveness creep into my tone. Then why is Michelle Hamilton going around saying that you did? My mouth dropped open, and I saw Hillary and Georgina exchange glances, which made me think that they had also heard this. And while I kind of wished they would have given me the heads up, I could also understand why they hadn't. What were you supposed to say to a new friend? By the way, someone is spreading rumors saying you killed her husband? Sharon, that is enough, Hillary admonished. Sharon finally had the grace to look a little contrite, but it made me realize Michelle was gutsy enough to not only accuse me of killing her husband, but also spread it around town. A pang of fear went through me as I wondered if she would be so bold as to share her opinion with the sheriff. I had thought to myself more than once that I needed to clear my name before the sheriff tried to pin the blame on me, but I hadn't expected anyone else to finger me for murder. Let's pretend for a second it's not me, because it's not. Who do you think would want to see Pete dead, Sharon? I snapped, finally losing control. Her head jerked to the side and her eyes widened. I don't think I like your tone. You started it, Sharon, Hillary said. I gave her a smile. Thank goodness I had one ally here. A few minutes went by and there was a lot of fidgeting. The tension was palpable, but my gaze didn't waver from Sharon's, and neither did anyone else's. Why are you all looking at me? She finally said, her shoulders hunching. We're waiting for you to answer Tillie's question, Hillary said pointedly. How would I know? Okay, then why does his ex-wife think I did it? I said pointedly. They weren't divorced yet. Goodness, Sharon, who cares? Stop beating around the bush and answer her question, Hillary said. Michelle thinks she was having an affair with Pete, she finally said, looking at the floor. What? That's insane. I didn't even know the man. I laughed while Sharon glared at me. How could anyone even entertain this? I wondered. Sharon shrugged. I'm just telling you what she said. It's not at all true. I'd never even spoke to him until he came in my bakery the night before he died. She knows about that. She thinks you had a lover's quarrel and you killed him. Was Michelle the one who had seen him storm off, not Hillary? I really needed to ask Hillary so I could cross her off the list. That might explain why she thought I was having an affair with him. If anyone believed Michelle's nonsense, and by anyone I meant the police, I could be in more trouble than I thought. Looked like I needed to dig into this on my own and find the killer. I didn't want to wait around for Michelle to rally the whole town, and maybe even the sheriff, against me. Chapter 9. The rest of book club went by quickly once Sharon stopped badgering me. Everyone felt a little uncomfortable. At least that was the vibe I got, and people made their excuses to leave shortly after. Soon it was just me, along with Hillary, Georgina, and Alice. I was helping them clean up, but I couldn't wait to get home to process the night's events. We worked a few minutes in silence until Hillary spoke. Don't worry about anything Sharon says. Everyone knows she's just a gossip. I knew she was trying to make me feel better, which I appreciated. Michelle came into my bakery yesterday, I finally said, and while I was looking down at the table I was wiping off, I could feel 3 pairs of eyes on me. Way to bury the lead, Tillie, Hillary said. Why didn't you tell us? Georgina said softly. I'm new in town. I didn't want to cause waves and figured she was just upset and looking to take her anger out on someone. What did she say to you? Hillary said as she stopped cleaning and looked at me directly. Georgina and Alice were doing the same. I knew they meant nothing by it, but their intense scrutiny was making me nervous. She accused me of killing her husband and didn't seem to have too much respect for local law enforcement. She mentioned not being surprised that they hadn't arrested me or something like that, but she was going to make sure that I was held accountable. Tillie, I don't want to be negative or make you worry or anything, but that sounds like a pretty harsh accusation, and I'm not sure I would just blow it off, Georgina said. Well, the police haven't arrested me yet, so I figure no matter what she thinks, maybe the police don't agree, I said, although I wasn't sure they bought it any more than I did. The truth was, her words had been in the back of my mind the last 2 days. I was worried, and I just didn't know what to do about it, which I explained to the ladies. Sheriff Donovan is a reasonable man. He's not some bumbling yokel, like Michelle Hamilton might want you to believe. He worked for the NYPD for years before coming to Sweet Haven, Hillary said. If he thought you were guilty, you'd be in jail. I wasn't sure if that was supposed to comfort me, but it kind of did. She had a point. He did seem no nonsense and straightforward. He's also one of the town's most eligible bachelors, Georgina added with a wink. While I thought the sheriff was attractive, I had more pressing things on my mind than his sparkling blue eyes and eligible bachelor status. What should I do? I thought when she came into my bakery that she just needed to vent. I didn't realize she was going to spread rumors all around town. This could really hurt my business, I said, and then realized my business wasn't the most important thing at stake here. And someone needs to find the real killer because it certainly wasn't me. That might be difficult. I could probably list enough people who would have liked to kill Pete to fill a sheet of paper, Hillary said. My eyes must have registered the surprise I felt because Georgina immediately added, Hillary is exaggerating. I can't say Pete had a lot of fans in town, but the people of Sweet Haven don't go around murdering people just because they don't like them. Whoever killed him must have had a reason beyond just general dislike. Did you know he had a silent partner in the bakery? Alice spoke up. I saw Hillary and Georgina's heads snap in her direction. No. How come you never told us, Alice? Hillary demanded. I just found out. After he was murdered. You mean someone was his business partner and he wasn't God's gift to small business ownership like he wanted people to think? Georgina asked with an uncharacteristic bite in her tone. Yep, Alice replied. Who is it? Hillary said, and Alice shrugged. I have no idea, she said. Maybe whoever it was wanted Pete dead? How did you find out there was a silent partner? Hillary asked. From Graham. He figured Michelle would be in, trying to take things over, and gave me an envelope to give her when she came in. Graham? Graham Bridges. That's one of the 2 attorneys in town, so I'm assuming Graham was Pete's attorney, Hillary said. The document didn't have any names that I could see, just the company name. I might have taken a quick peek inside the envelope, she said sheepishly. I bet Michelle wasn't happy to hear about a partner, Hillary said. She wasn't. She came in probably an hour after Graham left and tried to start giving me orders. When I gave her the envelope, she pulled out the paperwork and her face went white as a sheet and she left without saying anything. That's when I closed. I wasn't sure what to do. I wonder who Pete's silent partner was, Georgina mused. Do you remember the company name on the paperwork, Alice? I asked, finding it odd that an attorney would give Alice papers meant for Michelle. Something didn't sound right. Tree Hill Properties. Of course, I didn't recognize it, and the other ladies just shook their heads. Why do you want to know, Tillie? Hillary said. Well, a business partner might be someone who had a motive for murder. We need to find out more about this company. Hillary's eyes grew wide. You mean we should investigate this ourselves? Yes. I need your help. I can't do this myself, and I need to clear my name, I said, even though the thought was probably crazy. I was no detective, but I didn't think I could just let things go the way they were either. I didn't want to suddenly be arrested, and I also didn't want my new business to suffer if people in town thought I'd killed Pete, since it seemed Michelle was determined to make people think I did. I'm not sure about that, Georgina said. At the same time, Hillary said, I think that's a great idea. I laughed out of nervousness more than anything else. Thanks, Hillary. I'd appreciate any help you can give me. Okay, then. Let's make a list of everyone who might want to kill Pete. I warn you, Tillie, it's going to be a long one, Hillary said as she pulled out a sheet of paper from her book club folder and started writing. Chapter 10. The next morning, I opened Paw Paw's bakery, yawning my way through all my opening tasks after a night of tossing and turning. While I wanted to figure out who had killed Pete Hamilton to protect myself, I was a former housewife and current business owner. My skills were being a mom and baking. Why on earth did I think I had any business trying my hand as a private investigator? Though I did love Magnum PI, but seriously, whom was I trying to fool? I didn't even know the people on Hillary's list, much less know which one of them might be a killer. The door chimed and I turned to see Hillary floating in, a beaming smile on her face and a bold print duster flowing out from behind her. Hi. What brings you in so early? I asked. She had her own business to mind, and mornings were her busy time, so maybe she had some good information. I couldn't sleep last night. I was too excited, she said, bouncing up and down on her feet. I tilted my head, not exactly sure what she was getting at. About what? She looked around the store as if to see if anyone else was listening, even though we were the only 2 people in the retail space. I know we talked about some of the people who might have had it out for Pete Hamilton, but last night I added to that list. With notes for you, she said in a whisper and pulled a list from her bag, handing it over. As we stood in the middle of Paw Paw's bakery, I looked over her list, which took up about 3/4 of the page. I gave a low whistle. This seems like a lot. Well, she shrugged sheepishly. It's probably overkill, but I put down anyone who I knew had some type of beef with him. Not my fault he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. As I looked at the list, my heart sank at the impossibility of what I wanted to accomplish. What's wrong? Hillary said, clearly picking up on my despair. I don't know any of these people. How am I supposed to figure out who killed Pete when I know nothing about anyone on this list? Hillary put her arm around me and squeezed. "That's why you have me, Chelsea, Georgina, and Alice. We're a team." "And I appreciate it," I said, knowing their knowledge of the town and people was going to be very helpful in my search for Pete's killer. Hillary had gone through her list with me, and we formed a loose plan of action. She felt, and I didn't disagree with her, that me not knowing the people on this list might just give me an advantage. I could talk to people without biased opinions clouding my judgment. Since I was currently the only employee of Paw Paw's bakery, I couldn't do any sleuthing until I closed at 6, but Hillary assured me that would be the perfect time to talk to 2 people on the list, Dave Barnes and Fred Topol. Known adversaries of Pete Hamilton, they had recently had a blow-up argument that had almost gotten physical. Hillary had said I could catch them at the tavern, the local bar, where they could be found in the evenings, sipping on cold beer. Supposedly, Pete, Dave, and Fred had been friends forever until a falling out a few years ago, and then it was Dave and Fred against Pete. I asked Hillary what their falling out was about, and she said it had something to do with a business venture gone wrong, but wasn't sure of all the details. They had kept it all very hush-hush. I'd left Beans and Daisy at home today and had run home on my lunch break to take them out and refill their water, knowing I was going to be a little later than usual tonight. I locked the bakery door promptly at 6 and headed out the back. I had a steady stream of customers all day, enough to make me confident my bakery wasn't a horrible idea. Most of the people had been tourists who were traveling with their dogs and wanted to get them a special treat. I assumed, much like the rest of the local business owners, it was during tourist season when most of the money would be made. I walked to the tavern since it was just a couple of blocks away and I could use the exercise. I had gotten in the habit of long walks with Daisy each day leading up to the opening of the bakery, and I missed getting the exercise since I'd opened. I needed to get up earlier or something to get the walks in for my benefit and Daisy's. Beans, well, he wasn't a fan of exercise, so he didn't always go with us. I made it to the tavern and pushed the door open, expecting a dim, smoky atmosphere, and was shocked when it wasn't that at all. The decor was what one might expect from a small-town bar. All dark wood, worn red vinyl seats, and a scarred-up pine floor. But it wasn't dark and dank. It was well lit, and I could see all the way to the other side of the room where there was a glass doorway that led to an outdoor space. Through it, I could see fairy lights and a comfy outdoor sectional calling my name. As much as I wanted to go out to the back and check it out, I was here on a mission. And Hillary had said that Dave and Fred always sat at the bar. It only took a quick scan to be able to figure out who was who based on her very good descriptions. I headed over to the 2 men and slid onto a bar stool next to the one who had a Detroit Tigers baseball hat on. His counterpart on the opposite side had a long gray beard and bushy eyebrows. "Can I get you anything?" the bartender came over and asked. "Just a glass of house white is fine," I said. I wasn't really in the mood for a glass of wine, but it would make a good prop. And maybe Fred and Dave would be more willing to talk if they thought I was just another patron having an after-work drink. The bartender poured my wine and I took a sip, eavesdropping on Fred and Dave's conversation, which wasn't hard. They weren't exactly whispering. After listening for about 10 minutes, I concluded they weren't exactly saying anything interesting either. Who knew fishing and the weather could provide so much conversation? I realized if I wanted to find out anything other than what the Farmer's Almanac was forecasting and when the fish might be biting, I was going to have to ask some questions of them myself. I took another sip of my wine to summon my courage before opening my mouth. "So have you both lived here long?" I said as an opener. They would have to know I wasn't a regular, so it made no sense pretending. And it was better than leading with the dreaded, "Do you come here often?" I didn't want them to think I was trying to pick them up. They both started in their stools, and then in unison, their eyes swung to me. And then there was silence. What was it? They didn't talk to strangers? I looked around to see if there was any way I could escape. This clearly was a bad idea. When finally one of them cleared his throat and started speaking. Based on Hillary's description of the baseball hat, it was Fred. "Yes," he said. Seriously, a one-word answer? Geesh, didn't these guys know the meaning of small talk? No wonder they were confirmed bachelors, at least from what Hillary had told me. Now, Fred, that's no way to chat up a lady. Dave finally spoke up, plastering a toothy grin on his face and standing up, hitching up his pants. The way he leered at me, I was starting to prefer Fred's one-word conversation. "What's your name, pretty lady?" Dave asked, holding out his hand, which I shook, and then Fred did the same. "Tillie Moore." Dave looked at me, cocking his head and scratching it as if confused. Now, why does that name sound familiar? I knew I needed to be honest since my name had been in the paper and the subject of town gossip. After all, the entire reason I was here was to ask them questions about Pete. But now that I was here, ready to get my investigation on, I felt a little reticent to just blurt out who I was. My hesitation gave Dave the time he needed to put two and two together with a snap of his fingers. "You're the new lady who opened that fancy store for dogs," he said with glee at being able to place my name. He slapped his hand on his thigh and laughed deeply. "Yes, Paw Paw's Bakery. But not just for dogs. For any household pets," I added out of habit, not wanting to miss a chance to plug my business. Though something told me these guys weren't the kind to pamper their pets with custom bakery items. At least not Dave, judging by his laughter. "Stupid idea if you ask me. My dog does just fine with the bones I bring him from the butcher's," Dave said. I wasn't exactly sure what to say to that, so decided to say nothing and open a different line of conversation. "I love the town of Sweet Haven so far. Is it safe? I moved here from a small town where you didn't have to worry too much about locking your door. It's very safe. We haven't had any bad crime here for years. Well, up until your trouble," he said, and I knew he was putting everything together. "Your bakery is where old Pete Hamilton was murdered," he exclaimed, elbowing Fred in the ribs. "Yes, that's why I asked. I mean, his murderer hasn't been caught yet, and, well, I guess I'm just a bit nervous," I said, laying it on a bit thick. "You don't have any idea who could have killed him, do you?" Dave and Fred exchanged glances and then looked back at me, shaking their heads. "No, ma'am. No one much liked the guy, but I can't say anyone would kill him," Dave said, with Fred maintaining his silence. He clearly wasn't one to talk much. "Were you friends?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "Used to be," Dave bit off, and for the first time lost his smile. "Pete was—" Fred started to speak, and Dave cut him off. "She doesn't need to hear about our dirty laundry." "What happened between you?" I pushed. "Nothing that is of any concern to you. It's all water under the bridge." Dave had the smile back on his face, but his tone had an edge to it. He definitely didn't want to talk about his falling out with Pete. What did he have to hide? Chapter 11. I heard the bell on the front door ring and looked up from the display case to see Sheriff Donovan walk in. My heart sped up a little, and I wasn't sure if it was because the handsome detective had just walked in, or if the grim look on his face meant bad news for me. Was he here to arrest me? "Hi, Sheriff Donovan. Come to buy a treat for your pet?" I said, not even knowing if he had a pet, but hoping against all hope that was why he'd stopped in. "No. Unfortunately, I don't have any pets." My stomach flipped over as it sank in this wasn't just a social call. "Well, you should have pets. You are clearly a pet person." It was obvious by the way he loved on Daisy and Beans, who were on either side of him vying for attention, that he was a pet lover. I grew up with dogs, and if I had a less busy schedule, I would definitely have one of my own. "Feel free to stop by and see Daisy and Beans anytime you need to get a pet fix," I said, knowing I was babbling mainly to put off the inevitable. I was afraid I wasn't going to like whatever he had to say. "I'll keep that in mind." "What can I help you with?" I said, not really wanting to ask the question, but knowing that it would be better to just rip the Band-Aid off, so to speak. "I got a phone call from Michelle Hamilton." "Let me guess. She told you I killed her husband," I said, rolling my eyes, and that elicited a small smile out of him. "Something like that." Well, like I told her when she came in, I had nothing against her husband and had nothing to do with his murder. I didn't even know the man. And by everything I heard about him, I wasn't sure I would have wanted to. She came to talk to you? I'm not so sure talk is the right word. It was more like yelling and screaming at me. Caterwauling, as my grandma would say. His frown deepened, and it made me feel good that he seemed concerned Michelle had confronted me. Maybe he didn't put much stock in her accusation. She didn't happen to mention that. I'm sorry. I will have a talk with her. Regardless of her personal feelings, harassing you isn't okay. Why does she seem so convinced I had anything to do with her husband's murder? At this question, Sheriff Donovan pulled on his collar a little and looked down at the display case. I have a feeling you need to tell me something that I am not going to like. Sheriff Donovan shifted from one foot to another. I put my hands on my hips and stared him right in the eyes. Well? He raked his fingers through his hair before answering. She seems to think you were having an affair with her husband. So I have to ask, were you? I was just as shocked hearing it now as I had been when I heard the rumor. I haven't even lived here that long. How could she think I was having some kind of fling with her husband? Besides, weren't they getting divorced? He nodded. She seemed convinced about the affair, but when I asked her for proof, she didn't really have anything concrete. What did she actually say? My curiosity was killing me. That Pete was constantly talking about you and she had a feeling. Talking about me? Why would a guy who barely knew me talk about me? That doesn't seem substantial enough to bring you down here. He sighed slightly and turned to look me straight in the eyes, leaving me a little unsettled. I had to ask you, even though you don't seem the type. Now I really was unsettled. What type do you mean? You know, to carry on with a man who was still married? I tried hard not to smile at that comment because it did make me feel good, though I wasn't going to let on how the sheriff was making me feel when I was angry about Pete Hamilton's almost ex-wife throwing unfounded and unprovable accusations. She had to be crazy to think I had something going on with him. I couldn't even fathom why she was latching on to me. Well, listen, I didn't have anything going on with Pete Hamilton. Maybe she should turn her attention to his business partner, I snapped. It seems like his business partner, or his soon-to-be ex-wife, would have a lot more motive than I would have for killing him. How has business been? Sheriff Donovan said, changing the subject. I pursed my lips, thinking I might not let him off the hook that easily, but then decided I was tired of thinking about Pete Hamilton and anyone or anything else negative. I couldn't let Pete's murder distract me from my goal of making Paw Paw's bakery a success. To be honest, better than I expected. I was afraid after what happened that no one would want to come to the store, but I almost think it's had the opposite effect. Customers who don't even have pets have come in just to talk about Pete Hamilton. They aren't buying much, so I just hope all the foot traffic helps spread the word about the business instead of the murder. Sheriff Donovan wandered over to the bakery cases where my greatest creation sat. Wow, that cupcake looks amazing, he said as he peered in the case. Which one? The one with the small dog bone on top or the one with the kitty whiskers? They both look delicious, but I guess I'm kind of partial to dogs. That one is chocolate peanut butter. I thought dogs were not supposed to have chocolate. It's not chocolate like I would put in a human cupcake. It's carob, which is a chocolate substitute that's perfectly safe for dogs to eat. And if you don't mind a bland cupcake, that dog cupcake is also perfectly fine for you to eat. I just don't use all the sugar and things that I would put in a human cupcake. That's not good for dogs. So, you bake human treats as well, he said with a smile. Was he flirting? I quickly chased that thought away. I found the sheriff attractive, but that didn't mean he found me attractive, and he hadn't cleared me as a suspect yet. The last thing I needed was to get involved with a man anyway. I I love to bake and used to bake a lot for my kids, but there was always something fun about thinking up new recipes for the animals my kids would drag home, I said, sharing with him the same story I had shared with my new friends about how I got my start. I may not have any animals, but I think you will do a great business here, especially next year for the full tourist season. It seems like the tourists that come here have more than enough money, and spending it on their beloved pets is something they would completely do. Well, I hope so. If I don't end up in jail for a murder I didn't commit. It's pretty hard to run a bakery from behind bars. Are you worried about that? Wouldn't you be? I said crossly. He rubbed his hand over his face and suddenly looked tired. I understand. We've been working around the clock to try and solve Pete's murder. Let me know if Michelle bothers you again. You can always file a restraining order against her. I could, but that was the last thing I wanted to do. I didn't want to make things worse, and I had a feeling filing a restraining order against Michelle would definitely make things worse. Sheriff Donovan rapped his fist on the counter once, gave me a head nod, and then walked out the door. Beans and Daisy both dropped to the floor, staring at him, sad that he was leaving. Traitors! You'll abandon me for anyone who pays you some kind of attention, I said, leaning down to rub their heads. Though Sheriff Donovan had said he would talk to Michelle Hamilton, I thought back to what the girls had said the other night at book club and hoped they were still on board to help me investigate this murder. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like a good idea. I really hadn't pegged Michelle Hamilton as someone who would go to the police. I thought she would realize how insane it was to believe that I had anything to do with her soon-to-be ex-husband's murder. Knowing she had gone to Sheriff Donovan made me realize I needed to get serious about my investigating, to protect myself. I wasn't about to let someone ruin my business or my reputation. Chapter 12. Trying to get information from Dave and Fred had proved to be useless, so I was ready to turn my focus elsewhere. Not only had I not learned anything, but I had a feeling I'd given Dave the impression I was looking for a man, and that was so not true. It made me feel like finding Pete's killer was an impossible task, at least for me. Though the police hadn't had any better success either, it didn't make me feel any better. I had already dropped Beans and Daisy off at the bakery and walked next door to the muffin tin, hoping they were open for coffee and one of their delicious muffins. While my baked goods were fit for humans, I preferred people muffins and had been so busy I hadn't baked for myself lately. When I stepped out of Paw Paw's bakery, I could see a line out the door at the muffin tin. I couldn't wait to have business like that. It made me further wonder why Pete cared at all about my business. His sure was hopping. The muffin tins seemed to have plenty of customers. The line went fast, and after about 5 minutes I was standing in front of the display case alone. I must have ended the rush because there was no one behind me. I was grateful for that, so I could look at the selections and take my time. "What can I get you?" the young woman behind the counter asked me. I didn't know her name, but I had seen her working before. "I'm not sure yet." "I'm sorry," she smiled. "No worries. Take your time. They're all good." I was about to ask her what her favorite was when I saw Alice come out from the back. "Hi, Tillie," she said. "Can you start frosting the maple bacon cupcakes?" she called out to the other woman, who nodded and went into the back. "What do you recommend?" I asked Alice, who was behind the counter, waiting while I made up my mind. "I think they are all good, if I do say so myself, but my personal favorite are the chocolate cream cheese and the peach strudel." "Okay, how about one of each? One for now and one for later." I grinned. "Sounds like a smart move," she said, and grabbed a bag before picking out one of each of the pastries for me and then walking down to the cash register. $5.42. I handed over a 10 and was waiting for my change when I heard shrieking coming from the back room. Alice's eyes widened. "You'd better leave," she whispered. "It sounds like Michelle is here." "I thought she wasn't supposed to be managing the bakery. What happened to the partner?" I whispered back, but Alice didn't respond. I hated the feeling of being run off, but the last thing I needed was a public argument with Pete Hamilton's wife, almost ex-wife. Whatever. People already suspected me. I didn't need her crazy ranting to cement that idea. I grabbed my change and my bag and turned to go when I felt the hair on my neck stand up and a hush fell over the bakery. I had a feeling I hadn't taken my leave soon enough. "What are you doing here?" a loud voice boomed behind me. Loud wasn't even the best way to describe it. Thunderous was much better. I wanted to run out the door, but my grandmother had always taught me to stand up for what I believed in, especially if it was myself. So I turned to face Michelle, who was standing behind the counter heaving, her face red. She looked like she was gasping for air. "Getting a muffin," I said glibly, which in hindsight probably wasn't the best thing I could have said. It set Michelle off even more, and she hopped over the counter, coming at me. I was shocked at how nimble she was and backed up a few steps. She kept coming, so I took one more step back, hitting something hard. I turned to see what, or rather whom, I had run into and saw with relief it was the sheriff. He quickly stepped around me and intercepted Michelle. "Now what's all the fuss about?" he said in that calm, reassuring voice of his, looking toward Michelle. I figured either of us could answer, though this time I decided to keep my mouth shut and not antagonize her more, however tempting it was now that I had backup. "Her!" Michelle pointed at me venomously. "How dare she show her face here? Arrest her!" Sheriff Donovan sighed and shook his head. Michelle's eyes narrowed to slits so small I didn't know how she could see. "Now, Michelle, I know you're upset, but I don't have any grounds to arrest this woman. She killed my Pete. Arrest her immediately. I don't want her in my place of business." "Oh, please, you wanted to divorce Pete," a voice came from the crowd that had now gathered, and all eyes swiveled in the direction of the voice. It was Shelley Williams, the owner of Your Trash, My Treasure, and as Michelle turned her venomous eyes toward Shelley, I almost felt bad that I was grateful the attention was off me. "You don't know what you're talking about," Michelle screamed again, and had the sheriff not had a hold of her arm, I thought she would have lunged after Shelley. This woman was unhinged, and if there was a partner, did Alice now know who it was? Was that what prompted the bakery to reopen? If so, why was Michelle still insisting it was her business? "I think you and I should go down to the station and talk about this calmly," Sheriff Donovan said to Michelle as he started walking toward the doorway with his large hand wrapped around her upper arm, so she had no choice but to follow him. "Why me? I didn't kill Pete. She did," she kept shrieking. I couldn't tell what the sheriff was saying to her, but it seemed to calm her down a little, and she allowed him to put her in the back of a police car, visible through the bakery's front windows. A few seconds went by and the bakery stayed silent. Then finally someone from the crowd, I couldn't tell who, said, "Whoa, that sure was entertaining," and all the customers burst out laughing and talking about what had just transpired. "Tillie," I heard my name called and turned around to see Alice standing there. "I am so sorry." "You don't have anything to be sorry for. Those were her actions, not yours." "I know, but still." "Listen. Have you heard any more about who is behind the company that was Pete's silent partner? Is that why you're open?" Alice shook her head. "Maybe you should ask Graham. He might know. He's the one who told me I could reopen if I wanted, until everything was sorted out. Chances were he wouldn't tell me anything due to attorney-client privilege. Another dead end. Have a good day, Alice." "You too, Tillie." I was bound to. Surely it couldn't get any worse than this morning. Boy, was I wrong. Chapter 13. I stepped out of the muffin tin with my sweet treat. I had finally chosen a peach cupcake with vanilla ganache filling and buttercream frosting. Turning toward my bakery, I wanted to see my shop from the same perspective the customer saw it. All the displays I'd worked so hard on made me happy. I saw a small crowd of people gathered in front of the window display, and a feeling of excitement came over me. A crowd of people waiting to get in. I couldn't ask for more. As I walked through the crowd, I quickly realized they weren't a bunch of customers anxiously waiting to buy treats for their pets. They were staring at the huge gaping hole in my front window, with Daisy and Beans peering out from the jagged glass. Neither one of them was fazed in the least, but my stomach clenched at the thought that someone could have hurt him. How did this happen? I was gone less than 10 minutes, and I was outside half that time. Excuse me, I said, pushing my way to the front. Blinking back tears, I heard a soft thump and realized my bag of muffins had slipped through my hands and fallen to the ground. Without bothering to pick up the bag, I unlocked the door, though I had to hold back a nervous laugh since the hole in the window was so big I probably could have stepped through it and not bothered with the door. That just wouldn't have been a safe option. I went in and immediately Daisy and Beans trotted over to me. I reached down to pet them both, frantically looking them over, but they were fine. I scanned the front of the bakery, but didn't see anything out of place. I quickly pulled Daisy and Beans to the back room and closed the door so they wouldn't get any cuts from the glass all over the retail space floor. Tillie, are you all right? I looked at the front door to see Hillary and Georgina standing in the doorway, both with concern on their faces. I nodded and they walked over to me. I should have locked the door, but it didn't seem like anyone else was coming in. Who could have done this? I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. I didn't want to lose it in front of the crowd that was now peering in the hole. The gossip mongers were going to love this. The sheriff will get to the bottom of this, Hillary said. You need to call him. I think he's busy right now, I said, looking around again. It didn't look as if anything, but the window was damaged. Thank goodness for small favors, I guessed. As I looked around, I spotted a brick, which must have been what someone threw to break the window. I walked over to where it was sitting on the floor and saw a note taped to it. Picking up the brick and peeling off the note, I read the typed words. It's time for you to leave town. Get the hint. Or else. I heard Hillary gasp as she read over my shoulder. Is that a threat? Georgina said. Sure seems that way, I said matter-of-factly, trying to remain stoic while inside I was trembling. Are you okay? Sheriff Donovan said as he burst through the door, reaching me in 2 strides. I went back in the muffin tin and was told you were headed back here. What happened? Yeah, I'm fine. This must have happened while I was at the muffin tin, but I don't know how. I wasn't gone more than 10 minutes. 15 tops, and I stood outside for part of that time because there was a line. Realization dawned on me. Do you think Michelle staged that altercation so someone would have time to throw this brick through my window? I said, holding the brick and the note out to him. You shouldn't have picked that up. It will be harder to get prints. He ignored my question while he admonished me. Oh, sorry, I didn't think. I walked over to get a bag from behind the counter and put the brick and note into it, then handed it over, hoping I hadn't just screwed up the evidence. Do you think this could have been Michelle? Hillary asked him. It wouldn't surprise me, and I will definitely be speaking to her, but I'm not sure she had time, he said. I agreed. The window hadn't been broken when I walked over to the bakery, and even though I was there for a few minutes before fighting with Michelle, I didn't think she would have had enough time to break my window and get back to the bakery. Are you sure you're okay? He asked me again. I'm fine, I said, even though I really wasn't. There wasn't anything he could do. Are you going to make sure Michelle doesn't bother her again? Hillary said to him. I looked at her in surprise, not wanting her to get in trouble with the sheriff on my account, but I appreciated her sticking up for me. I had a stern conversation with her, and she knows this is her last warning. Now, if you ladies will excuse me, I need to get the crime scene techs back in here, so please don't touch anything else. He went back out, and I could hear him telling the crowd to disperse. Let me call Ted Carroll and get him to board up this window until you can get it fixed, Hillary said, pulling her phone out of her purse. Ted is the town handyman, Georgina said as I looked confused. He'll secure the window. You heard the sheriff. We aren't supposed to touch anything, I said. We won't until he's done. But I can at least call Ted and give him the heads up, Hillary said, catching the tail end of what I'd said, phone all ready to her ear. As a matter of fact, why don't we head next door to the coffee shop? The sheriff has this handled right now, and Ted can board up the window as soon as he gets the go-ahead. I wanted to argue and didn't want to leave, but I knew she was right. I was just in the way standing here. I needed to let the sheriff do his thing and maybe figure out who was out to get me. After this, it was clear someone didn't want me in Sweet Haven. Chapter 14. Here. My famous chocolate cinnamon latte and a blueberry scone on the house, Hillary said, setting the items down in front of me before taking a seat. Georgina and I were already sitting, with Daisy and Beans at our feet. As Hillary took a seat, I saw Alice and Chelsea walk in. "Are you okay?" Alice spoke up, putting her hand on my shoulder. I looked up at her gratefully and nodded. "I'm fine. Really, ladies, I'm fine," I said, a bit embarrassed that everyone was making such a fuss over me. "Who's manning the muffin tin?" "I called in one of our summertime temps, Lisa, but I can't be away for long. I just had to come tell you how sorry I am about what happened in the muffin tin." Alice continued, "That woman is just horrid." I don't normally like to speak ill of people, but I second that. "She's not the norm around Sweet Haven," Georgina added. "I like to think we are kind and welcoming." "You have been, really. I don't think badly of the town because of one person. Besides, she's distraught her husband was murdered," I said, feeling like I should be somewhat charitable. Like Georgina, I also didn't like talking badly about someone. "She's been completely out of line, and she's not fooling anyone. She didn't love him or want to be married to him. She just wanted his money," Alice said hotly. I gave Alice another glance. My first impression had been that she was quiet and a bit mousy, but this woman in front of me was anything but. She was roaring like a lion. "Now, just because they were divorcing, it doesn't mean she didn't still care," Georgina said. "She didn't. Trust me. You want to know why she thinks Tillie here was having an affair with Pete? She was having one herself, and that's why they were getting divorced. Not because of him. Because of her. She's trying to shift blame." Alice finished her sentence and pounded on the table. She was really worked up. "Do you know this for sure?" I asked. Alice nodded. "Who was she having an affair with, Alice?" Hillary asked. Alice looked around as if to make sure no one was looking before she answered. "Thomas Adler." There was silence as the ladies looked at one another. I had no idea who Thomas Adler was, although the name did sound a little bit familiar. "He's the mayor," Hillary finally said to me. "Are you sure, Alice? If she was really having an affair with the mayor, don't you think people would know? That would be hard to keep quiet." "Trust me, I'm sure." She nodded a few times and then crossed her arms over her chest. "Dave and Fred weren't really willing to talk, but I didn't get the sense either of them were killers." "But what I do know," I said, tapping the tabletop with my finger, "is that it seems like we have 3 people who would benefit from Pete's death. Michelle. That's obvious no matter how much she cries about how much she loved him," Hillary said. I nodded. She was definitely at the top of my list. "This mysterious partner, and now the mayor," I said. "I don't want to tangle with Michelle again, but I need to find out who this partner is. Alice, are you sure you don't know?" Alice shook her head. "I didn't even know until recently he had a partner, which was right before I told you all," she said. I sensed a bit of bitterness in her tone, though when she started speaking again, she was fine, so maybe I had imagined it. "He hid this partner from everyone. Michelle knows. And Graham, like I said earlier." "Then that's what we need to find out next. Who was Pete's silent partner?" I left Sweet Haven Beanery fortified with coffee and sugar and headed down the sidewalk to the offices of Graham Bridges, Esquire. While it was a long shot for me to think that Pete's attorney would break confidentiality, even though Pete was dead, it was worth a shot. Chelsea was nice enough to take Daisy and Beans back to work with her, since I was pretty sure the lawyer wouldn't love me coming in with my pets in tow. I had to pass by Paw Paw's bakery to get to the law offices, and, as I approached, I could see a man about my age, maybe a little older. in jeans and work boots, grappling with a large piece of plywood as he tried to hoist it onto my front window. "Are you Ted?" "Why, yes, I am," he said, turning toward me and leaning the plywood against the window. "I'm Tillie Moore. I own the place," I said, nodding toward the bakery. "I mean the business, not the building." "Nice to meet you, Tillie Moore," he said and stuck his hand out. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I really appreciate it." "No problem. When Hillary told me what happened, I was more than happy to make sure your place was secure. Plus, I know your landlord, and he would have a conniption if he thought rain or anything could get in his building." I groaned. I hadn't even thought about that. Mr. Tuttle, the older gentleman who owned this whole block, probably wouldn't like this turn of events. What if he blamed me for it and kicked me out? "Well, again, I appreciate it. Any friend of Hillary's is a friend of mine," he said. I got the feeling he might be a little sweet on her. "Did you know Pete?" His lip curled up in distaste. "Unfortunately." "Oh?" "He was a worthless weasel." Ted spat on the sidewalk and seemed to avoid meeting my gaze. "But I didn't kill him, if that's what you're thinking. Do you know who did?" "If I did, I'd tell the police, not you." "Why do you care?" he snapped. He was getting heated talking about Pete, and I did need him to fix my window. Had I made a mistake asking him questions? "He was killed in my place of business." "Of course I want to know who did it," I said, standing there with my hands on my hips. "I guess. Anyway, if you want me to board this up, you'd better let me get to it." Frustrated, I made my way down the sidewalk, a few more storefronts, until I reached the law offices of Graham Bridges. The ladies had told me he was one of only 2 lawyers in town and had been for years, so as a result, knew everyone's business. I pushed open the door, letting the cool air wash over me, and mentally crossed my fingers that he'd be willing to talk. Chapter 15. "Can I help you?" an attractive brunette said as I walked in. She was probably in her early 30s and dressed in a smart-looking white linen dress. I was hoping to see Graham Bridges. I was feeling hot and sloppy compared to the sleek creature in front of me, so I tried to pull the curls that had fallen out of my ponytail behind my ears, but her disapproving eyes fell on me and stilled my hands. "Do you have an appointment?" she said, and tapped a few keys on her computer. I assumed looking at his calendar. "No," I shook my head. "This will only take a minute." The woman frowned at me, made a few clicks of her mouse, and then said, "There's just not an opening in his schedule today. Would you like to make an appointment for next week? I promise I'll only take a few minutes of his time." "Please," I wheedled. "Is there a problem?" A deep voice came from the hallway. I took a step forward to look toward the voice and saw a couple of open doors, but no one appeared. No problem, Mr. Bridges. Just someone without an appointment," she called back as she glowered at me. "Mr. Bridges," I called out. "My name is Tillie Moore, and I would just like a few minutes of your time, please." Miss Calm, cool, and collected did not like that at all. Her eyes narrowed, but before she could say anything, a man popped out of one of the doorways and beckoned me to come back. "Thank you," I said as I sat down before his imposing wood desk. I took a quick look around and noticed a wall full of professional accreditations and family photos. "I'm afraid I may have made your assistant angry," I said apologetically. He chuckled as he leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs. I pegged him to be in his mid-60s, and he was quite a handsome man with silver hair, and clearly had good taste in shoes, as I recognized his as a high-end brand my ex-husband liked. "Don't worry about her. Bridget has a thing for schedules, and anything that isn't on the schedule she doesn't like." "I can't argue with that. I'm normally fond of schedules myself. I appreciate you seeing me." "How can I help you?" he asked as he steepled his fingers under his chin. "Like I said, my name is Tillie Moore, and I just recently opened a business here in Sweet Haven called Paw Paw's Bakery." "I'm familiar." "Seems like you had a bit of a rough start here in town," he said. I felt a small sense of relief that he recognized what had happened to me. Maybe that would make him a little more willing to share information. "Yes, My business has gotten off to a rough start. I'm so sorry for your trouble, and as a lifelong resident of Sweet Haven, please know it's not the norm for our sleepy little town. Even during peak tourist season, we have very little crime. Thank you. I'm not sure what your recent trouble has to do with me, though. I was wondering if you could tell me who Pete Hamilton's business partner was. Who owns Tree Hill Properties? I said bluntly, finding no need to beat around the bush. His face first registered confusion and then wariness, as if he were trying to figure out my angle. Ms. Moore, I'm not sure what your end goal is here, he started saying in a stern, lawyer voice. I realized being blunt may have put him on the defensive. Please, Mr. Bridges, hear me out. At first, I wanted to find out who killed Pete Hamilton in order to clear my name. But now, it's more than that, I said and explained to him about the note on the brick that someone had thrown through my window. Someone is trying to get rid of me, and I don't want to be gotten rid of. I want to make a home here and run a successful business. He sat silent for a minute or two, and I wisely kept my mouth shut, waiting for him to speak. I was pretty good at reading people and was quite sure pushing him would not get me the information I wanted. Better to take it slow. You're new in town. What makes you think Pete Hamilton had a business partner? It's what I heard. What you heard? His eyebrows raised. I realized how stupid that sounded, but I didn't want to get Alice in trouble. Yes, it's what I heard. I figured someone had it out for Pete. What if it was his business partner wanting to take over the business? So what you are asking me to tell you is who Pete's business partner was, and I'm not saying he had one. Who then would become the top suspect for Pete's murder? Well, yes. But this business partner would have nothing to fear if he didn't actually do anything. Graham burst out laughing. I wish I could help, Ms. Moore, but I can't. Can't or won't, I said, trying not to get angry. I did understand his position, but I had hoped he would understand mine. Won't, if you want me to be honest. Pete might be dead, but I'm still handling his estate, and therefore I'm still bound by ethics to keep his business matters private until the estate is fully settled. I am not in the habit of sharing my client's confidential business. Can you tell me who he left his share of the bakery to? Was it his wife? I said eagerly. Ms. Moore, as I said, I can't help you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I really do have work to do. He immediately spun around in his chair to face his credenza along the wall and started to shuffle some files. Putting his back toward me was quite an effective dismissal. I walked out through the reception area, not seeing his assistant. I looked at my watch. It was about 11, so maybe she'd left for an early lunch, I thought. I looked back over my shoulder. Sounds of typing were coming from Graham's office, but nothing else. Then I looked at the computer sitting on the receptionist's desk. It would only take me a second to peek. My heart started racing, and I walked over and peered out the front window. No one was around. I ran behind the desk, where I could see her computer had not yet fallen asleep. I put my hand on the mouse, clicking on the calendar icon, thinking I didn't have time to try to find files, but if Pete had just recently died, and he indeed had a partner, that partner might have met with Graham after Pete's death. I clicked to the week Pete had died and started going through each day with my heart thumping double time in my chest. I looked around and noticed a printer in the corner, so I hit print, jumping up from the chair and grabbing the documents off the printer just as the door opened and the receptionist walked back in. I stuck the papers in my purse and gave her a wide smile. Thank you. Have a great day, I said, and rushed out, leaving her to stare after me. I was 2 blocks down the street before I realized I was going in the wrong direction. No one had come out of the law office screaming, "Get back here," so I assumed they didn't know what I had done. Perhaps these calendar pages would shed some light on who Pete Hamilton's partner was. Chapter 16. I wanted to find a place to sit down and look at the calendar pages I had printed, but felt I should relieve Chelsea of her pet-sitting duties sooner rather than later. Plus, If I picked Daisy and Beans up and took them home, I would have privacy to look over the calendar pages. I could wait just a little longer. I headed back toward Paw Paw's bakery, but cut through the alley so I could get in my car and head over to Chelsea's without interruption. As I glanced down the street to where my bakery was, I didn't see Ted any longer, so assumed he had finished boarding up the window. I made a mental note to call the sheriff since I assumed, like last time, I would need his permission to get back into my store. The thought filled me with dread, but I needed to just focus on what I could control and not stress over what I couldn't, as my grandmother always used to say. It was about an hour later before I made it home. I'd stopped at Chelsea's boat rental business and had spent some time there letting her show me around. I also had a hard time getting Beans and Daisy to leave. They had Chelsea wrapped around their little fingers, or rather paw and hoof, and it took some hardcore bribery to get them in my Jeep. But we were finally home and settled, and I was at the kitchen table with a glass of iced tea. I pulled the crumpled papers from my purse and spread them flat on the table, then grabbed my notebook and pen. I had printed off the 2-week time period spanning before Pete was murdered through this week, so it didn't take me long to get through the entries, and I had to say I was a bit impressed at how busy Graham had stayed. Though since he was one of only 2 lawyers in town, it made sense. I set my pen down, took a sip of my tea, and looked at what I had written. No great surprise, the day after Pete's murder, his soon-to-be ex-wife had an appointment with Graham. Then there were a couple of crossovers from the list the ladies and I had made, but the name that surprised me was Hillary's. She hadn't mentioned anything about being a client of Graham's. It seemed to me that if she had a professional relationship with Graham, she would have maybe offered to ask him about Pete's business partner instead of sending me to a stranger. Though, to be fair, it was my problem, and she had been more than helpful. "I don't know what any of this means, Daisy," I said to her sleeping form next to my chair. Apparently, she didn't either, because she didn't bother to stir, and I sat there enjoying my iced tea trying to make sense of all this. I was wondering what my next move should be when the doorbell rang and Daisy and Beans jumped up and trotted to the front door. I looked through the glass and was startled to see Sheriff Donovan standing there. "What brings you here?" I said after I opened the door. "Can I come in?" His face was passive, not giving me any indication of the reason why he was here, which made me nervous. I wasn't used to the sheriff just stopping by, and this was now the second time it had happened. "Of course. Can I get you some tea?" I said as we headed toward the kitchen. "I would actually love some." "Go ahead and have a seat," I said, motioning toward the table as I grabbed a glass from the cupboard and filled it with tea from the pitcher I kept in the fridge. I turned back to the table and noticed him looking at my list and the papers on the table, and my face instantly felt hot. I set down his tea and slid into the chair across from him, not even bothering to try and hide what he clearly had already seen. He took a sip of his iced tea and just looked at me, eyebrows raised. I felt so guilty it took all my willpower not to squirm under his gaze. "So what brings you here, Sheriff?" "I thought I would tell you we are finished at your bakery." "That's good news. Do you know who did it?" "Not yet. I sent the note to the crime lab to see if we could get any prints, but my guess is that nothing useful will come of it." "And you're sure it wasn't Michelle?" "Yes. Her alibi before she started the argument with you checked out." "Have you found out more about who might have been Pete's partner?" "I'm not sure what they have against me, but it would seem to me that Michelle or this mystery partner would have the most to gain from Pete's death." "We can't find any record of one." "What?" "No partner. I was able to get all of his business records, and it's in his name only." "Then why did Alice say he had a partner?" I asked. "What possible reason would Alice have to lie and to do it so convincingly? Maybe there was more to her than meets the eye." "I'm not sure. Yet. But I will be asking her." I sat and thought about that for a second when the sheriff started speaking again. "Now, are you going to tell me why you have Graham Bridges' calendar printouts?" I squirmed a little. "Okay, A lot, as Sheriff Donovan stared me down. Then I took a deep breath and sighed. He had already seen the pages sitting on my table, so it's not like I could lie to him and deny it. It's not what you think, I started out, though instantly realized what a stupid thing that was to say. I wasn't a mind reader, but it was probably exactly what he thought. Uh-huh, he muttered and then crossed his arms over his chest. I went to talk to Graham Bridges to see if he'd tell me anything about Pete Hamilton's business partner. Alice told me he gave her an envelope to give to Michelle, and in it was a document that said Michelle had no ownership in the business, and it now belonged to Pete's business partner, a company called Tree Hill Properties. As far as I can see, Michelle and this mystery business partner are the two main suspects. And? Wasn't he just the man of few words, I thought peevishly. He didn't need to make this so hard on me. He wouldn't tell me. Did you really expect him to? I rolled my eyes and didn't miss the twitch of a smile that flitted across the sheriff's face. What harm is there in telling me now that Pete's dead? This mystery partner will have to come to the surface at some point. Beans, leave the sheriff alone, I called out to Beans, who wouldn't stop hitting the sheriff's hand with his snout, wanting some petting. He was making snuffling noises that I could never resist, and it didn't seem like the sheriff was able to resist either. It's fine. Beans is fine, I mean. How did you get your hands on his calendar? When I left his office, his assistant was gone, and her computer was still on. It's not like I stole private information, I said, trying to justify my actions. I beg to differ. I think his calendar is private information. His eyebrows rose. I felt duly chastised. You know what I mean. Not real, private legal information, I said exasperatedly. His mouth twitched again, and I didn't know whether to be relieved he found this a bit amusing or annoyed he was finding my actions amusing. I guess I needed to be grateful that he wasn't hauling me off to the jail. At least not yet. Did you find out anything useful? He asked, throwing me for a loop. Was this a trick question? No. He did meet with Michelle the day after Pete died, and he met with Hillary, but that's the full extent of the names I recognized. Oh, wait, I did hear Michelle was having an affair with the mayor. Am I in trouble? I finally had the courage to ask. Are you going to do it again? No. Well then, I think I can let it slide this one time. But seriously, Tillie, you need to leave the investigating to me. I wanted to. I knew I had no idea what I was doing, but I couldn't just sit here and not try to clear my name or maybe save my life. Chapter 17. Thank you, I said to Ted, who had just replaced my window. The sheriff had told me yesterday I could get back in, and I was lucky enough that Ted was able to get the glass cut to the right size this morning and had time to install it. It cost a pretty penny, and I was a little afraid to turn it into the insurance company since my business was only days old. The last thing I needed was a rate hike already. I was on a shoestring budget as it was. I busied myself rearranging displays that really didn't need rearranging, but I needed to stay busy to keep my mind off Pete's murder. The sheriff had been nice but stern yesterday in his warning to keep my nose out of police business, as he put it. I wanted to, but I had to be honest. I wasn't sure I had the patience to wait. Though bad things came in threes, so maybe my bad luck was done. A murder, a broken window, and a warning tied to a brick. That was enough bad things for a lifetime. I heard the door open and turned to see Shelley from My Trash, Your Treasure. She had a big smile plastered on her face, and I couldn't help but smile back. How are you this morning? She said. Good. Got the window fixed, and I'm hoping for customers. She frowned. You poor thing. You have been through so much. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I said, giving a half-hearted laugh. That's a great attitude to have. I want to apologize on behalf of the Sweet Haven Chamber of Commerce for what you've been through and see if there is anything we can do to help you. That's really sweet, Shelley, but other than spread the word about my business, I can't think of anything. I just appreciate your support. Well, you make sure to let me know if I can do anything. I will. Thank you. She stood there just looking at me as if she had something more on her mind. I wasn't exactly sure what to say. I noticed you've been hanging out with Hillary. Yes, I said slowly, wondering where this was going. I hate to speak ill of others, but I would watch your back, she said, biting her lip as if she really did hate to speak ill of others. My guess was this had been the real reason why she decided to pay me a visit, so she could spill the tea, as my Southern friends would say. I bristled a little at her talking about Hillary, but I had to admit I was curious, especially after seeing Hillary had met with Graham and hadn't said anything. What do you mean? Shelley looked around before she started speaking. Rumor has it that she wanted to buy the muffin tin to expand her coffee shop, and he wouldn't sell. That sounds like a normal business interaction to me, I said, though I did find it a little odd that Hillary hadn't told me. With everything going on, it seemed like she should have. Or maybe that was why she hadn't. I heard their last conversation got heated, she said grimly, nodding her head. Some would say that about my last conversation with him, too. Shelley, I don't see how it means I need to watch my back. Shelley sighed as if frustrated by my obtuseness. If she can't expand by buying the bakery, the only other way to expand would be into your space, she said slowly. That shocked me and I gasped. It wouldn't have occurred to me that Hillary might want my space, but then why would it? She had never said anything about expanding. I get what you're saying, but I thought this space was open for over a year before I leased it. Seems that if she really wanted to expand, she would have leased it then. Shelley shrugged. I don't know why she didn't. I'm just telling you what I heard. Who did you hear this from? It's confidential. I had to refrain from rolling my eyes. What was this? Middle school? If she wouldn't give me a name, I wasn't sure how much stock I wanted to put in her big reveal. What was Shelley trying to hide? I appreciate you telling me, but I don't see that this means Hillary is anything but a businesswoman who wants to expand. Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you, she said, and then flounced out the door, clearly miffed that I hadn't taken her warning seriously. I tried going back to rearranging the display but couldn't focus. I started to regret leaving Daisy and Beans at home this morning. If I'd had them with me, I wouldn't be here totally alone with my thoughts. Why hadn't Hillary told me about wanting to expand? I didn't want to believe Shelley's warning that I needed to watch my back, but how well did I really know Hillary? Chapter 18. I looked at the clock for the millionth time, and it was barely 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I felt like this day was one of the slowest in my entire life. Only a couple of customers had come in, which left the rest of the day for me to think about the visit Shelley had paid me this morning. I had hoped Hillary would stop in to say hi so I could ask her if what Shelley had said was true, but then part of me felt that if Hillary hadn't said anything, there was a reason. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, but I was going to need some answers. Sooner rather than later. After I swept the floor and dusted, it would be time to close. Then I was going to head next door to the coffee shop and see if Hillary was working. She'd been so friendly to me that I felt I needed to be honest with what I had been told. I locked the front door after flipping the sign to closed, put my keys in my front pocket, and walked next door to the coffee shop. I pushed open the door and immediately smelled the fragrant aroma of coffee. While I was definitely a coffee drinker, I loved the smell just as much. There's something about the scent of freshly brewed coffee that just made me feel relaxed. I looked around, but didn't see Hillary, though I spotted Alice sitting at a corner table by herself, reading a book. She looked up and caught my eye and waved, motioning for me to sit with her. I held up my finger as if to say, "Just a minute," and went up to the counter to order one of the cinnamon chocolate lattes that Hillary had gotten me hooked on. A few minutes later, I slid into a metal chair opposite Alice, setting my coffee on the table and hanging my purse over the back of the chair. "Good book?" I asked, pointing to the novel she was reading. "Extremely. It's one of Oprah's picks, and I will say I usually like anything on her list. Did you have a lot of customers today?" I frowned and shook my head. Unfortunately, no. But it takes time to build awareness, I said wryly. Alice gave me a sympathetic smile. I feel so bad about what happened yesterday with Michelle and your front window. Has the sheriff caught who did it yet? No. But clearly someone doesn't want me around, I said. Why else would someone write that note and break my window to make sure I got it? It's all just horrible. I am so sorry, she said. It's okay. Really, I just wish I could figure out who wants me out of the way. I don't know, she said simply. I toyed for a second with whether to tell her what Shelley had told me. Part of me didn't want to continue the gossip, but Alice was Hillary's friend, so maybe she could tell me if what Shelley had said was true. Has Hillary ever said anything about wanting to expand the coffee shop? Alice looked at me with a funny expression on her face, but I couldn't really tell what it meant. No, she said slowly. Who told you that? I hesitated for a second, but then figured I wasn't going to play the same coy game that Shelley played, so I came out and told Alice, who immediately wrinkled her nose like she'd smelled something bad. Are you not a fan of hers? She's okay, just a bit of a gossip. And to answer your question, no. Hillary never said anything about expanding. What exactly did Shelley say? Now, I almost regretted bringing it up. I didn't want Hillary to think I was gossiping behind her back, but I told Alice everything, and she seemed upset at the news. Are you okay? I asked. I'm fine. Listen, I didn't realize how late it was. I need to get going. It was nice chatting, she said, grabbing her book, which she shoved in her bag before bolting out the door. As I watched her leave, I wondered what it was that bothered her so much. That someone was gossiping about Hillary, or the news that Hillary might have wanted to expand the business and was talking to Pete about it? Completely baffled by Alice's reaction, I turned my attention back to my latte and sat there, once again lost in thought. I really had thought when I told Alice that she would have either said she knew or laughed it off like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. I hadn't anticipated her getting upset, and that was what I thought she was. Upset. As I sipped my latte, I looked around the coffee shop, and while there wasn't anyone else here that I knew, and in spite of what had happened in the last week, I felt comfortable here, in the coffee shop and in Sweet Haven. Something I hadn't been sure I would feel again. I had spent so many years building a home, cultivating friendships, and enjoying my community back in Alabama. When I left, one of my fears was that I wouldn't feel at home anywhere else. But I had really come to love Sweet Haven in the short time I'd been here. It made me even more focused on trying to find out who might have it out for me so I could go on enjoying my new life. You closed early, a female voice snapped. I looked up to see a middle-aged brunette with a scowl on her face staring at me. Excuse me? I asked, not sure I heard her right. You closed early. You're supposed to be open until 6, she snapped again. My face felt hot with embarrassment that I'd closed early and now a customer was upset. I just couldn't win. I am so sorry. I'll be more than happy to go back and open the store for you. I don't want any of your stuff. Seems kind of silly to spend that kind of money on baked goods for pets, she said, slipping into the chair next me. Then I guess I don't understand. Why are you upset? I'm not open if you don't want to buy anything. I'm just here to give you a message. Oh? Michelle wants to talk to you. Michelle? The woman rolled her eyes. Yes. Michelle Hamilton wants to talk to you. She wants to talk to me? I parroted. The woman rolled her eyes again. Yes. 7 p.m. The brew house. Where's that? I said as she stood to get up. In Clearwater. Don't be late. She left the coffee shop as quickly as she had arrived. Apparently her mission was over. But why did Michelle want to talk to me? Was this a setup? It might be, but I wasn't going to be able to sit by and not find out. Chapter 19. Pulling into the brew house 10 minutes before 7, I was aware my heart was already beating fast in anticipation. I wondered if I was insane coming to a town that I'd never visited to meet someone who had just screamed at me at the top of her lungs, accusing me of killing her husband and demanding the sheriff arrest me. I wasn't necessarily scared of her, but I also realized that meeting her in a town where I knew no one might not be the smartest decision I had ever made. What if she had killed her husband and had me in her sights as her next victim? My curiosity was outweighing my common sense right now. I shuddered at the thought. I did feel somewhat comforted by the fact that we were meeting in a public place. I parked off to the side of the building, facing the front door. I wanted to see Michelle go in first so I could see if she had people with her. I had toyed with the idea of asking Hillary or Georgina to come with me, but I hated to get them involved, especially if Michelle went crazy again and the cops had to step in. I scrolled through email on my phone to kill time until I saw Michelle walking to the front door. I waited a few more minutes after she entered, but no one else seemed to be following her, so maybe this wasn't an ambush. I couldn't help but chuckle. Ambush. Ha. Like this was a Western and we were having a duel at sunset. Shutting my car off, I got out and headed into the bar. Unlike the tavern in Sweet Haven, which was light and airy and not tavern-like at all, the brew house was what my kids would have called a pit. It was dark and dingy, and my shoes were sticking to the floor. I let my eyes adjust to the dimness and then scanned the room to look for Michelle. I saw her coming out of the bathroom and taking a seat toward the back, so I walked in that direction, my nerves getting the best of me and making my legs feel shaky. I reached the table before she looked up and noticed me, and you could have knocked my socks off with the wide smile she gave me. It was a vast difference from yesterday when she wanted to claw my eyes out. Was this genuine, or was she trying to disarm me? "Hi, please have a seat," she said and motioned to the chair across from her. I cautiously slid into the seat. "I'm sure you're wondering why I asked to meet you." I wanted to say that was the understatement of the year, but simply said yes. I was still a bit apprehensive, wondering what all of this was about. I wasn't planning on doing anything that might set her off. The last thing I wanted was to get kicked out of the bar. First, I want to apologize. I've acted like a fool, and I'm thoroughly embarrassed and ashamed of how I've treated you. I wasn't sure what to say to that. Luckily, I was saved from answering by the waitress who approached our table. "Can I get you two anything to drink?" she asked as she set menus down in front of us. "A glass of Chardonnay," Michelle said. "Just an iced tea for me, please," I said, not really wanting to let down my guard and relax with a glass of wine. I mean, she'd said she was sorry, but I didn't entirely trust her. Though she seemed sincere, it was just such a departure from every encounter since we met that I was a little hesitant to blindly trust her. "I appreciate that," I finally said after the waitress left. "As I told you before, I had nothing to do with your ex-husband's murder. Nor were we having an affair, and I am so sorry for your loss." "He wasn't my ex yet," she said, not exactly snapping, but her tone had an edge. I knew her sweetness and sincerity couldn't all be genuine. "So what did she actually want?" "I'm sorry." "I didn't know," I said, although I did. Kind of. I had heard so many different things that I wasn't sure what was true and what wasn't at this point. I had hoped to leave here having a better idea of whether she killed her almost ex without getting myself in trouble in the process. "Of course you didn't. You have no idea what I've been through with that man," she said, and then launched into a 30-minute diatribe of how she'd been wronged for years by Pete Hamilton. Even the waitress who interrupted us once to take a food order and a second time to set down the chips and salsa and potato skins we had ordered barely got her to stop talking for a minute to ask if we needed anything else. I couldn't get a word in edgewise. I just nodded and said a few hums. "Anyway, now you can probably understand why I was just not myself," she said, and finally stayed silent for a minute, allowing me to talk. "Yeah, I understand. I had a bad marriage, too. It's not an easy thing to have to go through," I said, trying to muster up sympathy. It wasn't as if I wasn't sympathetic, but I wondered how exaggerated her side of the story was. I knew from my brief experience and from what I'd heard and seen that Pete was no peach. But even my ex looked good compared to this guy Michelle was describing. Had he really been as evil as she made him seem? I thank the good Lord we didn't have kids. Pete was so selfish he never wanted any. That should have been my first clue about the kind of jerk I married. I hate to even ask this, but do you have any idea who could have killed him? I asked tentatively, not really wanting to bring the conversation back to her suspecting me, but also unwilling to leave here without more information, and not more information about her horrible marriage. I bet it's that mousy girl who works at the bakery, she said, and snapped her fingers. She looked oddly proud of herself. Alice? I said, frowning. She seems so sweet. Yeah, and those are the ones you must watch out for. That's how they lure you into a false sense of security, then bam! She slapped her hand on the table, and I jumped, not expecting it. But why? What would her motive be? Mark my words, she had a thing for Petey. I tried not to cringe. For as horribly as she described him, Michelle certainly wasted no time jumping to Alice having a thing for Pete. And me, too. The way she talked about him. Who would want him? I don't know. From what I've heard, she was his right hand. I'm sure their relationship was just professional. Michelle snorted and slapped her knee. You're new in town. You haven't seen how she looked at him, but believe you me, I saw it. Maybe not, but for a hot minute you thought I was having an affair with your husband, and that was the furthest thing from the truth. I didn't want to rile her up, but I didn't want to let her talk bad about Alice either. The last thing I wanted was to see her hound Alice like she had me. Okay, I'll give you that. So who else do you suspect? I said, scooping up a generous amount of salsa with my tortilla chip. I love chips and salsa, and even this insane conversation didn't put me off wanting to eat them. It could be any number of women. They all wanted my Petey. It was all I could do not to gag on my chip. I realized I was new in town, but I highly doubted all the women in town wanted Pete Hamilton. Maybe in his dreams. But somehow, Michelle was convinced he was a ladies' man. Anyone else you could think of who might have a grudge against Pete? He had a long-standing feud with Ted Carroll, but he's a nice guy. I don't see him killing anyone. Ted the handyman? I asked her, thinking of the man who had boarded up my window. I needed to find out more about him. What about his business partner? Her eyes narrowed. Peter didn't have a business partner. Why would you think that? I must have heard it somewhere, I said. Well, he didn't. Pete had so many women chasing after him that I couldn't keep track. I'm sure one of these killed him. I'm sorry I accused you. You're not really his type. Her insult hurt, but I wasn't going to respond. I was getting the impression that she wanted to blame a woman, any woman, for Pete's death. I honestly don't know what to think. I just know that Sheriff Donovan had better do his job and find the killer. My Petey deserves justice, she said and sniffed. She dove right back into listing all of Pete's numerous transgressions. This woman was giving me whiplash with her constantly changing direction. I just kept eating my chips, glad it seemed like she was done harassing me and wondering if Alice was wrong about the partner, but then Graham didn't say much, but he alluded to there being one. What was the truth? Chapter 20. What a day, I said to Daisy and Beans as I took a sandwich and iced tea to the couch. I was exhausted. Last night when I met with Michelle, I wasn't out that late, but I got home and couldn't sleep, just tossing and turning thinking about what she had said. The thing that stood out most to me was her saying Pete had a feud with Ted Carroll. The handyman that Hillary said was so amazing. I was surprised, mainly because Ted wasn't on the list of people we'd come up with as potential suspects. It seemed odd to me that Michelle would say they were such enemies, but neither Hillary nor the other ladies had even mentioned him. Was it another case of Michelle fixating on something not really there? Or was there some truth to it? I had hoped to get over to the Sweet Haven Beanery at some point in the day and talk to Hillary, but, as fate would have it, today I had a steady stream of customers, many who made purchases. It was the busiest sales day I'd had yet, and I wasn't about to close the store a second early. As it was, I stayed open 15 minutes past closing time while someone was painstakingly trying to decide between a beef or chicken-flavored treat. The coffee shop closed at the same time I did, so by the time the customer left, the coffee shop was dark. I was almost thankful since I was tired myself, but now it left me sitting here wondering. I propped my feet up on the coffee table and took a bite of my ham and cheese sandwich while Daisy and Beans sat at my feet hoping for a crumb. You guys are ridiculous, always begging. Of course, they were always begging because I was a big sucker and always gave them food. I did so now, pinching off a small piece of my sandwich for them both. Now go. Leave me alone, I admonished to no avail. I had to chuckle. They were so darn cute. Daisy with her goofy grin, and Beans with his corkscrew tail wagging back and forth. I couldn't stop thinking about Ted and his relationship with Pete, so I picked up my phone. It wasn't too late to text, so I shot off a quick text to Hillary. I heard that Ted and Pete were enemies. Is that true? Not 2 seconds later, the phone rang. Hello? That's an odd question, Hillary said, and from her tone, I got the sense she wasn't exactly thrilled I was asking. Who told you that? I hesitated for a moment, hoping she wouldn't be upset that I had met with Michelle and now questioning her about Ted, someone she seemed to like. I met with Michelle Hamilton last night. She didn't seem to think he did it, but I was surprised to hear it. There was a moment of silence, and I started to worry that she was angry, and then a burst of laughter came through the phone. Sorry, she said as her laughter subsided. Did you say you met with Michelle Hamilton? The same Michelle Hamilton who has been going around accusing you of killing Pete? As she talked, I realized how bad it sounded. I hadn't killed Pete, and that hadn't stopped Michelle from saying I did. What if Ted was just another poor victim of her slander and I'd bought right into it? I know. It's crazy, and I'm sure there's no truth to it. Well, it's not completely crazy. What do you mean? I asked, swinging my feet back to the floor, as if that would help me listen more intently. They did have a long-standing feud, but I know in my heart that Ted would never have been mad enough to kill him. Is that why you didn't put him on the list? Do you like Ted? I asked, even though it was off topic. I got the sense in the brief moment I had met Ted that he was sweet on Hillary, and now I was kind of thinking the feeling might be mutual. There was a pause before she answered. We're just friends, she said. But her voice lacked conviction. However, I wasn't going to press her now. It wasn't the most important matter at hand. But at some point, I would ask again. I thought they would make a cute couple. Why the feud? They used to be in business together. In the bakery? I know it might sound odd, but yes. Before Ted was the town's handyman, he and Pete started off at the farmer's market selling their baked goods. They had been in the same home economics class and always joked that their teacher, Mrs. Lee, instilled the partnership of baking in them both by insisting they always partner together in class. I smiled at such a cute story. They got so popular they stopped doing the farmer's market and focused on special orders, and that's when they decided to start a brick-and-mortar bakery. What happened? All that sounds positive. Pete comes from money and Ted doesn't. Ted couldn't match Pete's initial investment, and Pete shut him out of opening the bakery. That's horrible, I exclaimed. That's not the worst of it. Ted kept baking and taking orders, just on a small scale. He truly loved baking, and Pete started a campaign to ruin him. The town would have been big enough for the both of them, but Pete couldn't stand Ted having any of the limelight. And if you ask me, Ted was the better baker, and that's what Pete was really afraid of. That's really sad. So what happened after that? He called the health department on Ted. You see, he didn't have a commercial kitchen, and technically that's a no-no. Everyone in town knew it and no one cared. Well, they shut him down and fined him. He couldn't take the chance of another fine and vowed never to bake again. He started his handyman business and never looked back. So he did hate Pete. I can see why. You would think. But he didn't hate Pete as much as Pete hated him. Why? It seems like Pete won and had a successful bakery for 25 years or so. He did, but I don't think Pete could stand that Ted was the better baker. He was so resentful. Ted tried to patch things up, but Pete wouldn't speak to him and went out of his way to be difficult. When Ted started his handyman business, Pete tried his old trick of getting him shut down. This time, though, Ted was older and wasn't violating any laws, so Pete was unsuccessful. How petty. I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. I was a believer in the law of abundance, so I had a hard time thinking how anyone could be so petty for so many years. It was, but on Pete's side, not Ted's. Had Ted turned up dead, Pete would have been my first thought, but Ted would never kill Pete. He didn't hate him. I mean, we don't talk about it, but I think he felt sorry for Pete, for being so consumed with hate. Then why do you think Michelle threw his name out as a suspect? Hillary sighed. In case you haven't figured it out, that woman is a loon. She's just grasping at anyone she can pin it on. She probably did it herself. Don't you think she would have been found out by now? I couldn't imagine the sheriff wasn't privy to all this information. He certainly would have brought her in if he really believed she was guilty. I don't know. Maybe she's smarter than we think. I just know it wasn't Ted. We talked a few more minutes before hanging up. I had toyed with the idea of asking about her business expansion, but I was worried I would make her angry. I liked Hillary and didn't want to offend her and lose her as a friend. Chapter 21. Thank you for shopping at Paw Paw's Bakery, I said, and handed the bag of a half-dozen pupcakes to the customer with the Afghan hound. It was mid-morning, and she had been my second customer of the day. I was highly encouraged by the amount of foot traffic I'd had since opening. I was sure I was like any business owner, worrying daily whether my business would attract enough customers to make it. This business owner thing certainly was not for the faint of heart. As I was rearranging the pupcakes to fill the space left by the ones I had sold, I caught a glimpse of the sheriff as he walked in front of my windows and pushed the door open to come in. My heart dropped. I wondered what it was this time. I straightened up and plastered on a smile I didn't feel. Fake it till you make it was what I was going for. Hi, Sheriff. What brings you here today? Well, I have some good news for you. You found Pete's murderer? He sighed. Not that good news, but I did find out who threw a brick through your window. Hey, that's something. Who? Someone by the name of Mickey Fisher. I don't think I've met a Mickey Fisher. That's not surprising. Mickey Fisher is only 15. Okay, I'm really confused. Why would a 15-year-old want to vandalize my store? I was shocked a child had done so much damage. That's what I'm still trying to get to the bottom of. He said he was approached coming out of the convenience store by someone he didn't recognize, who offered him $50 to throw a brick through your window. They apparently handed him the brick with the note already on there. The kid said he had no idea what it said, and I believe him. He was willing to risk getting in trouble for $50? Kids are stupid sometimes. What can I say? And he has no idea who paid him to do this? That surprised me. Why would you take a risk like that when you didn't even know the person? Nope. He gave us a description, but it wasn't very good, so unfortunately we're back to square one. Was it male or female? I asked. Female. But before you say anything, it wasn't Michelle. I did manage to find that much. I realize this isn't great news since we still don't know who's behind it, but I wanted to let you know. Was it a blonde? I said, thinking about Michelle's friend Shelley. No. Why do you ask? No reason. I appreciate you letting me know, I said, and I did. While I did wish things were progressing quicker, I had faith in the police department and that Sheriff Donovan would soon find the culprit. I just wish there wasn't still a murderer on the loose. What are your thoughts about Ted Carroll? I asked. I think that he's a darn good man. Why, did he not do a good job on your window? I frowned. Oh no, nothing like that. I heard some things about him and The sheriff interrupted me. Who put a bug in your ear about Ted Carroll? He asked, his hands on his hips, right by his service weapon. I was sure he had no intention of using it, but it was a good reminder that he was the law. No one in particular. Let me guess. It was Michelle. I tilted my head and gave him a look. How did you know? I'm the sheriff. I know everything. You met with her. I refrained from pointing out the obvious, that he didn't know who'd killed Pete or who was behind the hole in my window. I wasn't that surprised someone had seen me and reported back. Even though it had been in the next town, I was sure people talked. Trust me, I took everything she said with a grain of salt, and Hillary seems to be a big supporter of Ted's and said no way would he have killed Pete. I'm assuming you agree with that? Why would you say that? Ted isn't in jail. I also assume you're good at your job, I said. He smiled. I am good at my job, and you are correct. Ted has an alibi. This is just so frustrating. Trust me, I get it, but we are doing everything in our power to bring the killer to justice. And on that note, I really should head out. The sheriff walked out the door, and I couldn't hold in a deep sigh as I leaned back against the counter. I was so excited about my business and about my new town, but until Pete's killer was caught and the person who paid to have my store vandalized was identified, I still couldn't get rid of that sense of foreboding, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Chapter 22. I'll be there. I sent the reply text to the group chat with me, Hillary, Georgina, Chelsea, and Alice. I was about to close Paw Paws and meet the ladies at the coffee shop for an after-hours hangout. It had been a few days since the sheriff had told me about Mickey, and I'd been so busy I hadn't had the chance to fill everyone in. I was looking forward to some girl time, even though we were meeting at Sweet Haven Beanery. I wanted to run to the store and grab some snacks. I didn't want Hillary to think I was some kind of freeloader. I drove, since the grocery store was a few blocks out of town, and was soon walking up and down the aisles trying to decide what I was in the mood for. I was starving, so everything looked good. I tossed in 2 different boxes of crackers and some Oreos. Who didn't love Oreos? And then headed to the dairy aisle and grabbed a few different types of cheeses that were already cut in cubes who needed a meal when you had snack food. I went through the self-checkout, which was quick, and headed back. The whole trip took 20 minutes, and I was walking through the door of the coffee shop with my bags of goodies just in time. The other ladies were already there sitting down, so I went over and dumped my bags on the table while Hillary locked the door behind me. You didn't need to bring food, Hillary said as I pulled the items out of the bags. Oh, but I'm glad you did, Georgina said, grabbing a piece of cheese and popping it into her mouth. Oh, Oreos, Alice said, and we all looked at her. What? Just because I'm a baker, it doesn't mean I don't appreciate the finer things in life, like Oreos. That is so true, I said, and the ladies nodded. I know you told me, but does everyone else know you made up with Michelle Hamilton? Hillary said. Georgina, Chelsea, and Alice all looked at me in various stages of shock. I shook my head. Not that I was trying to keep it a secret, but the last few days have been busy, which is good, I added. I was thrilled with the business that had come through my doors. That's awesome, and it should just get better as we head into tourist season, Georgina said. But since you're here, you must fill us in about Michelle. Did you really make up with her? I wouldn't really call it that exactly. She sent a friend to ask me to meet with her in Clearwater, and I admit I was super apprehensive, but my curiosity won out. And you lived to talk about it, so I assume it went okay, Georgina said. It did. I mean, I think she's a bit crazy and was so hot and cold about Pete, or Petey, as she kept referring to him. She mentioned Ted as a suspect. She seemed more focused on all the women in town who apparently wanted Pete more than anyone else. I'm not sure how grounded in reality she is, but at least she's off my back and hopefully stays that way. She's right about one thing. There's no way Ted had anything to do with Pete's murder. Hillary burst out. Here she was defending Ted again. Not that she shouldn't. But I still thought there was more to Hillary's feelings about Ted than the fact that he was a good handyman. I also heard that you might have wanted him dead too, Hillary. Some kind of business deal, I said with a laugh, although it still did make me wonder. Hillary's head reared back, and her eyes widened. I could tell she was shocked. I could also tell the other ladies were surprised too by the gasps they let out. Not that I think you had anything to do with Pete's murder, it's just gossip, I quickly added. I felt bad that maybe I should have said something when we were alone, not in the group. Is that true? Did you have a business deal with Pete? Alice asked as her lips disappeared into a thin line. Hillary looked back and forth at us for a second, and then took a deep breath. Yes. I was trying to get Pete to sell to me. Alice's eyes flashed with anger, but then she quickly recovered and didn't say anything more. Was she upset because she worked at the bakery? Maybe she thought if Hillary bought it, she would be out of a job. Why didn't you say anything? Georgina asked, sounding truly curious, and not seeming bothered by the fact that Hillary hadn't told them. Not even once. Pete swore me to silence. He said if word got out, the deal would be dead. Though I'm not sure he ever meant for the deal to actually work. He was such a jerk. I can't believe I trusted him. You mean he was going to sell you the bakery? Alice exclaimed. He said he was. We had a handshake deal. But he wanted his divorce to be finalized first. He didn't want to have to share the proceeds with Michelle, and that's why she was dragging out the divorce? For money. We all knew that, Hillary said bitterly. This was a new side of her I hadn't seen before. I can't believe you didn't tell me, Alice said, hurt in her eyes. I couldn't. Please don't be mad, Alice. You wouldn't have been out of a job. The muffin tin is such a large space. It could handle me adding the coffee machines and give customers more room to sit and enjoy both your baked goods as well as the coffees. It made perfect business sense. But Alice looked mad. What happened? I asked. Initially, he said he needed to wait until his divorce was finalized, and then he came to me and said he had a better offer and wanted more money from me. I just couldn't swing it. When I said no, he offered to buy the coffee shop, and I told him where he could stick that idea. By the end, I almost wondered if his original intent was to try to buy my business. I don't think he wanted to sell at all. So you don't really think he had another buyer? I asked, thinking that maybe the other buyer might want Pete dead if he was trying to use a bidding war to hike the sale price. No, I don't. I think he was playing some twisted game with me. To what end, I don't know. I'm not sorry he's dead, but I certainly didn't kill him, she said, and looked around at us as if she needed confirmation that we didn't think she could have murdered Pete. None of us thinks you did, Hillary, Georgina said, and we all nodded. Even Alice. She no longer looked angry. So maybe this news had just caught her off guard. I'm sorry for not telling you guys. Please understand. I couldn't. Of course we understand, Georgina assured her. I nodded my agreement and reached over to pat her hand. I'm sorry for bringing it up, but I knew you didn't kill Pete. So I guess I didn't think it was a big deal. Though if you wanted to expand, why not rent my space? I didn't want to start from scratch. Pete approached me about expanding. He said he wanted to get out of the business, and I thought it made sense. I felt so guilty for keeping it a secret, but why had she kept the secret after Pete's death? I wasn't going to ask any more hard questions tonight, though. I wanted to enjoy girls' night. That might have been a mistake. Chapter 23. Invigorated after a relaxing evening and a decent night's sleep, I decided to come in super early the next day and try some new recipes. So far, I had stuck with my basics, but now I was thinking I needed to get my customers excited about a treat of the day. If I could build buzz around a different creation every day and give people a reason to keep coming back in, then maybe I could increase my sales. I took a sip of coffee from the travel mug I had brought from home and went to get my recipe book. I walked over to my makeshift office to grab it off the desk where I had last left it. The leather-bound journal wasn't there. I hardly had anything on my desk, so it wasn't like it was buried under a pile of papers. I looked in both the desk drawers, and nothing. I tapped my fingers on my travel mug, trying to think back to the last time I'd had the book. I distinctly remembered bringing it here the day before my window was broken. I'd sat it on the desk thinking I could brainstorm new ideas while it was slow. I didn't remember taking it home, but I must have. It was frustrating. But the morning was not lost. I was pretty sure I knew the recipe I wanted to make by heart, so I would try it. What was the worst that could happen? I'd have to throw out a batch of treats. It certainly wouldn't be the first time. Luckily, pets weren't as discerning as humans. I grabbed some paper and a pen from my desk and wrote down the recipe for breakfast dog biscuits to the best of my remembrance, then went and got out the ingredients I needed to get started and lost myself in measuring and mixing. 15 minutes after I put them in the oven, the timer dinged, and I took the biscuits out and set them on racks to cool. They looked good, but I would have to taste test one after they cooled to make sure I got it right. I had just enough time to wipe my counters down, and it was time to open. Tonight was book club, and even though the last book club hadn't been entirely pleasant, what with Sharon asking me if I'd killed Pete, hopefully those rumors were done being circulated by now and I could relax. I had made cupcakes last night, and I was looking forward to a girls' night and getting to know some of the women I had met. At the last book club a little bit better, I hadn't had the time to read this week's book either, but Hillary assured me that didn't matter. I knew it would take a while to get in a routine. I just tried to make the best of my time until then. "Hi, Tillie," Hillary said when I walked into the coffee shop. "What did you bring us this time?" she asked, nodding her head toward a Tupperware container I had in my hands. "Double chocolate peanut butter cupcakes." Peanut butter with chocolate is my favorite combination. Hillary's eyes grew wide, and she nodded. "Mine too. There isn't a better flavor combination out there, in my opinion." We took a few minutes to get ready and organized, and finally pulled our chairs in a circle like we had last time. Again, much like last time. We discussed the book, but I enjoyed listening to the conversation. And unlike last time, I didn't feel so apprehensive. While Pete's killer hadn't been caught, things had quieted down and no one was currently accusing me of being a murderer. That was always a bonus. So that's a wrap for this book. Anyone have a book they'd like to pick for the next meeting in 2 weeks? Hillary asked, and the women chatted about their ideas. Again, I remained silent. I did tell myself that whatever book they decided on this time, I would actually take the time to read it. I enjoyed the book club and wanted to be a part of the conversation. Okay, Finding Rachel it is. Sounds like fun to switch from cozy mysteries to a clean romance. "Now let's dive into the snacks," Hillary said. And we all got up and headed over to the table that had a little bit of everything, sweet, savory, and plenty of drinks. I loaded up my plate and headed back to my chair, setting my iced tea beside me as I sat down and then balanced my plate on my lap. Hillary sat next to me, and once she sat down, the first thing I saw her bite into was one of my cupcakes. Oh my goodness, this is insanely delicious. "What kind of filling is this?" Hillary said, her eyes rolling in the back of her head. I took that as a compliment. While I loved making baked goods for animals, the pets couldn't show as much appreciation as a human, so I was enjoying how much Hillary seemed to like the cupcake. "It's chocolate ganache with peanut butter added in." "Everyone, you must try one of the chocolate peanut butter cupcakes Tillie made." "Are they for humans?" Sharon asked. Apparently, she didn't quite trust me yet. I refrained from rolling my eyes or saying anything snarky. I really did want to play nice with everyone. "Yes," I said with a smile. "Kill them with kindness," my grandmother would often say. As an adult, I tried to live by that rule, finding it usually worked better than the alternative, but it wasn't always easy. "Oh, Sharon, don't be like that," Hillary snapped, and Sharon's eyes widened in surprise. "Sorry, Tillie," she mumbled. "No worries, Sharon." "Hopefully that will be the end of that," Hillary whispered to me. "Thank you." "How do you like Sweet Haven so far, Tillie?" a woman named Brenda asked me. I'd been introduced to her at the last book club, but hadn't really gotten the chance to talk to her. "I love it. I spent summers here as a child, and when I decided to move here, I hoped my childhood memories were going to be just as good as an adult, and they have been." "I'm glad. I'm a lifelong resident myself. and I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. Sharon said. How has business been? Another woman asked. It seemed that everyone was interested in talking to me. Well, everyone except Sharon. For whatever reason, she seemed a bit cold, but I wasn't going to worry about it. There were plenty of other people who seemed to want to get to know me better. The next half hour was spent getting bombarded with questions, but not in a bad way. The ladies were just curious, and I was fine with that. I was making new friends, and that made me happy. It started to get late, and people were leaving. I helped Hillary clean up, as did Georgina and Alice. Chelsea hadn't come tonight, saying that work had been brutal that week and she wanted to get to bed early. Tonight went well, Georgina said as she was sweeping the crumbs off the table. I would agree. I was happy the ladies finally seemed to be warming up to Tillie before you know it. You'll have more friends than you know what to do with. Hillary smiled. I'm thankful for that. But it sure seems like Sharon doesn't like me. Oh, don't pay attention to her. She's always been a grumpy Gus, Georgina said. She'll come around eventually. She's like that with everyone new. It didn't take long to get things cleared up, and I went over to a booth where we had set our purses. Alice was already standing there, slinging her crossbody bag over her shoulder. Can you hand me the black one there, right next to the brown one? I asked her. Alice leaned over to grab the purse for me, and when she pulled up the strap, it caught on someone else's purse and dumped its contents out onto the floor. Crap, Alice said loudly, clearly feeling bad as we looked at the mess of receipts, lipsticks, pens, and other odds and ends. As I bent down to help Alice start picking things up, I noticed something. I froze as Hillary came up behind me. That's mine. Don't worry about it. I dump it out on a weekly basis. I keep saying I need a new one that zips. This is yours? I said slowly. Yeah, but like I said, no biggie. Not like dumping out the contents can hurt anything. I reached over and grabbed my recipe book from the pile of stuff and stood up. Why do you have my recipe book in your purse? I asked again, my voice slow. I was shocked and was trying to wrap my head around the fact that she had my recipe book. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why or how had Hillary been in my bakery, but when, What are you talking about? I've never seen that before, she said, stepping closer to see it. She didn't seem like she was lying. She looked genuinely shocked. But then why was it in her purse? What's going on over here? Georgina asked as she walked up. I realized the other day my recipe book was missing from the bakery. We accidentally knocked over Hillary's purse and my recipe book was inside it, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. I didn't want to be accusatory until I got to the bottom of things. I liked Hillary and didn't want to think she had stolen my book. I swear, Tillie, I don't know how that got in there. Now Hillary looked upset that I might not believe her, and I was torn. I wanted to believe her. But how many times could I keep ignoring these red flags? Chapter 24. The next couple of days went by slowly, as for the first time since I had met Hillary, I hadn't at least texted with her. I felt the void as if I had known her a lot longer than just a few weeks. I wanted to reach out and put this behind us, but I still didn't know why my recipe book was in her purse. Hillary had insisted the night of the book club meeting, when I discovered the book in her purse, that we call the sheriff and tell him what had happened. But it still remained a mystery. If Hillary hadn't somehow taken the recipe book, then someone else did and then slipped it into Hillary's purse. But if that was the case, had someone intended for me to find it? What were the odds that her purse would get knocked over in my presence and I would find my recipe book? Extremely slim. Then what was the point of putting it in Hillary's purse? I sighed as I dusted the display shelves. I noticed I needed to order some more of the fancy collars I carried for dogs and cats, while I carried a few pet accessories to supplement the baked goods. I hadn't anticipated selling much. I'd been pleasantly surprised that they sold better than I thought, though there wasn't much competition in town. Maybe I should expand my selection, I mused. I heard the door chime ring, and I turned around to see Georgina. I hadn't talked to her either since the incident. I hadn't talked to anyone, and it made me sad. Hi, Georgina, I said and smiled, hearing Daisy and Beans walking up from the back. I just wanted to stop and check in on you. Georgina said as she reached down to pet Daisy, who was grunting. She was so into the affection Georgina was giving her. I hated that I felt there was tension in the air, but I wasn't exactly sure how to fix it, without knowing for sure what had happened with the recipe book. "I'm okay. It was nice of you to stop in. I hope you're not angry with me." "Of course not. None of us are. Hillary especially understands how you might be mistrusting." "I mean, you can't refute the fact that your recipe book was in her purse," Georgina said matter-of-factly. I truly appreciated her honesty. I sighed, feeling some of the tension leave my body. "I'm sorry I've been distant the last couple days, but I just don't know what to think. My gut tells me that Hillary had nothing to do with somehow getting into my bakery and taking that recipe book, but then I'm at a loss as to how it could have happened." As I was talking, Georgina nodded. It seemed like she really did understand my dilemma. "So the sheriff hasn't had any ideas either?" she asked. Now it was my turn to shake my head. "I haven't heard from him since that night either, so I assume not." "So let's try to figure this out. You remembered seeing it the morning before someone threw a brick into your window," Georgina said. "Yes, that's the last time I remember seeing it, and I could almost stake my life on the fact that it was on my desk before that happened. So what if someone broke in and the brick was a distraction? So you would be more focused on that and not notice right away that the recipe book was missing." "That makes perfect sense, but it still doesn't tell us who broke in or how they got in. Besides, who would want my recipe book? Good point. I assume nothing was in there but recipes. I really thought I could be of some help," she grimaced. I reached out and touched her arm. "You have helped just by stopping in. I do appreciate it." "Well, I should get back to work," Georgina said. She walked to the door and turned back toward me. "You know, I vaguely remember years and years ago that the coffee shop, your bakery, and Pete's bakery were all connected somehow. When I was a kid, there was some kind of 5 and dime store that took up all the spaces. I wonder if there is still a way to get from one building to another. Maybe that's how someone got in?" After that parting note, she left, leaving me to wonder even more if there was a way to get into my bakery from one of the other businesses that opened up even more possibilities. It was still early in the day, and I typically didn't get busy until after lunch, so I walked up to the door, locking it and flipping the open sign closed. There was no way I was going to be able to concentrate on work without at least looking for a way someone broke in, and Georgina's theory was as good as any other. Though I knew it wasn't good business sense to close, I couldn't wait to do this until after closing time. It was easy to mark the front of my bakery off the list because everything was drywall, even the ceiling. But the back of the building was a different story. It hadn't been built out the way the front of the building had, so I walked into the back and started scrutinizing every inch of wall space. I realized how shabby it was compared to the front of the store, which had been redone as part of my lease agreement. I knew no one was going to see the back area, so as long as I had my commercial appliances, I didn't really care about the aesthetic, however. It wasn't that big of a space, and it didn't take me long to be able to rule out any secret hidden door in the wall. The ceiling was open all the way up, and you could see the rafters, so there was nothing obvious up high either. The last place left to look was the bathroom, back in the corner. Interestingly enough, it was a full bath. The bathroom did have a drop ceiling, so I grabbed a small step stool. I climbed up on it and poked the tiles up, but didn't see anything except ceiling. "Move back, Daisy," I said, as she had been following me all around the store, and this bathroom wasn't big enough for both of us, though she was trying to fit. I opened the door to the shower and poked my head in, not expecting to also see ceiling tiles, but there they were. Maybe the previous renter didn't think they would use a shower enough to create water damage, but that still felt kind of odd. I pulled in the step stool and climbed to the top, popping up when I reached the ceiling tiles, and was shocked at what I saw. There was what looked to be an 18 by 18 square cut into the wall between my bakery and Pete's bakery. I could hear muffled sounds of two ladies talking in the back. I put my foot on the top step of the step stool a little tentatively until I felt it was stable and stepped all the way up. which made me tall enough that even at my 5'3" I could just see over the opening. I was staring straight at a panel with a small handle, which I used to slide it gently to the side. And there I was, looking into the back of Pete's bakery. Was this how someone had gotten in to steal the recipe book? Was this how the murderer got in to kill Pete, even though that didn't explain why he was in my bakery? I stepped back down the stool, lest anyone catch me staring at them, and reached for my phone that I'd stuck in my back pocket. I clicked on my contacts, went to the first number in my favorites, and hit it. I chuckled nervously at the fact that I never would have expected in my life to have the sheriff on speed dial. It started to ring, and I waited for him to answer. Chapter 25. 15 minutes later. And once again, my bakery had police looking over my bathroom, and the sheriff was questioning me. Daisy and Beans were pressed against each of his legs, trying to give the hint they wanted to be petted. "You say you had no idea that this opening existed," he said for the second time. I was getting a little frustrated with him. "No. What do you think I go around popping up ceiling tiles to see what's up there?" I said with a bit of exasperation. "Why did you do it now?" "I had reason," I said forcefully. "I looked because today I found out that at one point these buildings were connected. I assumed they were still connected at ceiling level. I decided to look. I thought this might explain how someone got in and stole my recipe book. Maybe this was how Pete and his killer got in too. Well, I will be talking to everyone who works at the bakery, and I'd call Ted to patch up that hole." "Alice," I said with surprise as she walked up to me and the sheriff, "are you okay?" "Who let you back here?" the sheriff said, his eyes narrowing. The front door was open. "I walked in after someone walked out." "I'm sorry. I was worried about Tillie." "If you don't mind, I'll need you to take this conversation somewhere else," he said to us. We nodded. "Come over to the bakery and one of my special cream cheese muffins is on me," she said, and we walked next door. I left Daisy and Beans at the shop after the sheriff assured me that he would make sure they didn't get out. When we got to the muffin tin, Alice told me to have a seat and then went behind the pastry case. She walked back to our table, balancing a tray of 2 muffins and 2 cups of coffee. She delicately set the food and drink in front of me with a concerned look on her face. "Are you sure you're okay? Why are the police at your place again?" I took a sip of coffee, relishing how the hot liquid made me feel more relaxed. As a caffeinated drink, I knew that wasn't necessarily the case, but the ritual of drinking coffee was what made me feel good. For a minute. I hesitated to tell her why the police were in my shop. I wasn't exactly sure if I should say anything at all, and yet Sheriff Donovan had said that he was going to talk to everyone who worked at the bakery, so she would find out soon. Surely there was no harm in telling Alice. Plus, he hadn't told me not to say anything. "You won't believe what I found. Did you know there was an opening that connects my bakery with yours?" Alice's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean?" "In the back, where my bathroom is, there is an access panel that leads into your bakery. I think maybe that's how someone got in to steal my recipe book, and maybe even to kill Pete. Maybe that's how Pete got in, even though the back door was open. He could have opened it after he got in, or maybe that's how the killer left." "That's kind of scary," Alice said. I nodded in agreement. I had no idea these buildings used to be connected until Georgina told me. Now that you mention it, I vaguely remember that being the case when I was a kid, but I haven't thought about it in years. The peanut butter in the muffins smelled so mouth-wateringly good that even though I hadn't been hungry seconds ago, my stomach was growling now. I took another sip of coffee before peeling the wrapper from the muffin. "What kind of muffin is this?" I asked. "It smells divine." "It's a new recipe, apple cream cheese peanut butter." I paused for a second. "Apple cream cheese peanut butter? That's an interesting flavor combination." Alice shrugged. "Sometimes it's the most random combination that tastes good." "Did you create this?" Alice nodded. "Yep. Do you like it?" I took a bite, but as I chewed the muffin, it just seemed to stick in my throat. I took a sip of coffee, washing it down. Well, delicious, I lied. I couldn't taste a thing, because all I could think about was that the muffin recipe that I was testing for my bakery's fresh flavor of the week was an apple peanut butter muffin. It seemed like an awful coincidence for Alice to have just tried a new flavor that was exactly the same as the last entry in my journal. Though I was probably being paranoid, this was definitely a sweet muffin made for human consumption. What's wrong? Nothing. Listen, thank you for the snack and the coffee. If you don't mind, I'm going to take it with me and go back and see if the sheriff has found out anything else. Are you sure? I'd be more than happy to stay with you and keep you company. Oh, no, I'll be fine, I said, standing up. Had Alice been the one to break into my bakery? Why would she want to steal my recipe book, though, and what did that have to do with Pete's murder? Chapter 26. I was sitting at my desk thinking I really needed to head home. Beans and Daisy were sprawled out on the floor, but I knew they would be hungry soon. After the muffin incident with Alice, I had run back over here almost in a panic, telling the sheriff that I thought it might be Alice who took my book. He had been very skeptical, thinking it was a stretch and probably just a coincidence that Alice and I had had the same idea for a new muffin flavor. I understood where he was coming from. The muffins definitely weren't identical tasting, he questioned me, asking if I had mentioned my idea to anyone, and I couldn't be sure I hadn't. Maybe I had casually talked about it, which had given Alice the idea. He finally had left me extremely frustrated. Not that I wanted it to be Alice, but it kind of made sense. Did she feel threatened by my baking abilities? But it made zero sense. I didn't bake for humans. As I started gathering my things to leave, I heard a noise coming from the back of the room. I spun around, my heart thumping, and listened intently. But I didn't hear anything else and had to chuckle to myself. You're turning into a basket case, I muttered to myself as I grabbed my purse and slung it over my shoulder, then dug the keys out of it. I walked toward the back to shut off the lights, Daisy and Beans following me. I reached the light switch and flipped it off, and the room was barely lit by the emergency lighting. I turned toward the door to go out when I heard a creak coming from behind me, and I spun around to see Alice walking out of the bathroom. I jumped a little and realized Alice wasn't quite the friend I'd thought she was. So I was right. You got that recipe from my recipe book, I said. Yeah, I was so intent on finding out what you knew that I didn't think about what muffin I grabbed to give you. So you snuck in here to steal my recipe book, then planted it in Hillary's purse and knocked it over so I would suspect her? Yep, she said without elaborating, her eyes devoid of emotion. I don't understand. Did you think my bakery was competing with yours? I asked, thinking that had been why Pete had yelled at me before he was killed. Had he convinced Alice that she should be worried about it too? Oh, I don't care about your stupid recipes. I just needed to frame someone for Pete's murder and thought if I put your recipe book in Hillary's bag, the sheriff would think one of you might have done it. That seemed like a bit of a stretch to me, but I wasn't going to argue with her because I noticed what she was holding in her right hand. A gun. My heart started thumping hard. My gaze traveled back up to her face. She gave a half smile as she waved the gun around as she spoke. Please know it wasn't in my original plan to kill you, but now you've given me no choice. After I kill you, Hillary will be the #1 suspect. What makes you think the sheriff will think Hillary is the #1 suspect? I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. I didn't want her to know how scared I was. Oh, don't worry, I have that covered. Now turn around, she demanded. No, I said. If you want to kill me, you're going to have to do it with me looking at you, I said, much more boldly than I felt, Daisy whined. I knew she could sense something was wrong by the tone of my voice. Turn around, she demanded again. Why did you kill Pete? Why does it matter to you? If you're going to kill me, I feel I have a right to know. And I really wanted a few more minutes on this earth, to be honest. This was never about you, in fact. While I was mad that you signed this lease, ruining all my plans, I don't think you deserve to die. I guess that was big of her, thinking I wasn't a bad person for signing a lease when I had no idea how it impacted her. I don't understand. Pete promised me for years that he would make me a partner, that we would expand into the space and double our business. He even set up a partnership agreement with me and said once it was the right time, we would execute it. I waited patiently for years, and then he said to give it a little more time when he was going through his divorce. Then I found out he was in negotiations with Hillary. So you killed him over that? Is that why you lied about him having a partner to throw suspicion off you? I could see her hand start to tremble, and I was trembling too. I knew I had to keep her talking while I thought of a way out of this. Were you involved with Pete romantically? I asked another question since I'd been blamed for that, and Michelle seemed to think he was such a ladies' man. It was a valid question. Alice's face went ashen at my comment. It's none of your business, now turn around. As she spoke, there was a pounding on the front door, startling both of us. Tillie, I know you're in there. We need to talk, Hillary said as she pounded again on the front door. I looked at Alice, whose face grew red. Don't you dare move, she said, pointing the gun at me. She will eventually go away. If you make one peep, I'll shoot you. After what seemed like hours, but was more likely mere minutes, the banging ceased, and I assumed that Hillary had walked away. You know you're not going to get away with this, I said to Alice. Oh, but I will. Everyone underestimates me. But you just watch. I will get you out of the way. I will pin this on Hillary, and then I will be able to expand the bakery that was rightfully mine. She was clearly deranged, and the magnitude of my predicament started to really hit me. My eyes filled with tears. Oh, now don't start blubbering. Let's just get this over with. Turn around. We stood there for a second, me with no intention of turning around. I was hoping that as I continued to face her, she just wouldn't be able to go through with it. Then I heard a noise. It sounded like someone was opening the back door. We both swung our heads to look as the door opened. Then all I saw was a flash of fur lunging toward Alice, and Alice raised her gun. No! I screamed as the gun went off. Daisy! I screamed and took a step toward her, but quickly noticed that she was on top of Alice, at 150 pounds. Daisy was no joke. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sheriff Donovan kick the gun that Alice had dropped when Daisy jumped on her. Are you okay? Sheriff Donovan said. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Daisy. Off, he said. Daisy stepped off Alice as if it were nothing. She came over to me and I buried my face in her fur, squeezing her until she started to try to get out of my grasp. I gave her a quick kiss and told her she was a very good girl. As the sheriff hauled Alice to her feet, he handcuffed her before handing her over to the 2 police officers who had followed him in. Do you feel up to a statement? He said as I hugged Daisy again just to make sure she was really okay. Chapter 27. I can't believe it was Alice this whole time, Georgina said. We were all sitting at the coffee shop the next day right at closing. Hillary had shooed out the customers when I arrived and locked the door so we could have privacy. Hillary, I just want to apologize that I even thought for a minute it might be you, I said. Trust me, no hard feelings. I would have felt the same way. You're new in town. All these things happened and you found evidence in my purse. I'm glad that you no longer think it was me, but I hate that it was Alice. We all trusted her. We've been friends forever. I can't believe Pete did that to her. I feel bad when I think about that too. I should have known that after all those years she wanted to be more than just an employee, Hillary said. Pete really was a jerk. Did the sheriff tell you how she did it? Georgina asked me. He told me that once they got Alice to the station, she confessed to everything. She lured Pete into the back of my bakery, saying I wanted out of my lease. She said she had a key from the previous tenants as she had let a worker in at one point and never gave it back. Once they were inside, she shot him, hoping that by doing it in my shop, it would throw suspicion off her and onto me. That's horrible, Hillary said. When that didn't work, she snuck in through the hole and stole the recipe book and tried to frame Hillary. That's so sad. I'm just glad that you're okay. I can't believe she was going to try to kill you, Georgina said. How did the sheriff happen to find you at the right moment? He said he was driving by and had a weird feeling. Wow, someone upstairs was watching out for you, Georgina said. Let's all be thankful this is behind us, and hopefully I can just focus on my business and enjoying Sweet Haven, I said. So you're going to stay? Alice didn't succeed in running you out of town? Hillary said with a smile. No way, takes more than a crazy woman with a gun. Not to mention I've got Daisy to protect me. I don't have anything to worry about. Well, I can speak for all of us when I say we are glad to have you. Although the start to my business had been rocky, I truly did love it here. I had a lot more Sweet Haven pets to meet, and I couldn't wait. The end. You have just listened to Biscuits and Bedlam, a Paw Paw's Pet Bakery Cozy Mystery. Book 1. Written and narrated by Lena Turner.